Tomorrow, Crown Prince Robert becomes a minor, and he will take the place of head of the fortress in the Land of the Winds. Eliana, the main character of this dramatic but no less captivating story, and the sister of the future head of state, will also be participating in the ceremony. Her brother's words about her role being very important at the ceremony, and that no one else but her should bring the bomb stuck in her heart. Because of her love for her brother, the girl takes her duty very seriously, because she does not want to disappoint Robert, who trusted her. Before the upcoming day, the main character practices thoroughly, trying to complete everything without a single mistake. The girl's diligence and beauty amaze her servants, and the subordinate tries to prove to the girl how excellent she is. Despite all the compliments from the maid, Eliana continues to practice with all seriousness and asks the servants not to be distracted. Suddenly, due to an awkward movement of the hand, the bowl rolls to the very edge of the tray and falls to the floor with a loud sound. Both girls watch in horror as the bowl, with its many dents, continues to roll away from them. The maid begins to apologize and asks her mistress to have mercy on her for treating such a priceless thing in this way. Eliana understands the servant's grief, because of this the girl could easily be fired, which would deal her a big blow, so she decides to take all the blame on herself. The main character calmly picks up the bowl with many dents from the floor and, trying to calm her subject, convinces her that it is not her fault. Despite all the girl's words about her mistress having nothing to do with it, Eliana ignores them and only asks for the hall to be cleaned. The heroine decides to personally tell her uncle about what happened and convinces the maid that everything will be fine and there is no need to worry about it. But standing in front of the door, she doesn't know at all how to explain the situation that has happened. All her thoughts are filled with fear and thoughts about how angry her uncle will be when he finds out about everything. Eliana, who had no idea what to do and was trying to find the right words, heard a voice calling her by name. Turning around, she sees her brother already standing next to her, and with a sharp movement of her hand, hides the crumpled cup behind her back. Robert, with a smile on his face, asks his sister what she is doing here, to which the heroine tries to come up with excuses as quickly as possible. Trying to change the subject, Eliana asks if her uncle is very busy, to which she receives a positive answer. Seeing that his sister was hiding something and so diligently did not want to show it, Robert, leaning slightly in the hope of seeing what was behind her back, asked about it. The main character, trying to take a step back so that her brother wouldn't see anything, stumbled and, waving her arms, began to fall down. Having managed to react with a quick movement of his hand, the guy managed to grab his sister, preventing her from falling. Suddenly, Eliana realizes that she still couldn't hide the dented cup from her brother, because in her fear she didn't even realize that she had removed her hands from behind her back. At first, not understanding, but then realizing what exactly his sister was hiding, Robert decided to simply ignore what he saw. For him, his youngest daughter was more valuable than any relic, and therefore, only out of concern for his sister, the guy picked her up in his arms, to which she screamed in fright. Eliana's brother, realizing that it was all about her shoes, decides to make sure of it and sees that the shoes really are terribly narrow. Seeing the abrasions on his sister's leg, he points out to her that this is all due to her diligent rehearsals before the ceremony. The main character, trying to somehow explain herself to her brother, says that she decided to wear these shoes for the first time. Robert, without even letting the girl finish speaking, reminded her that she was his only sister and would remain hers no matter what. Carefully and tenderly putting more comfortable shoes on Eliana's feet, he tried to convince his sister that she didn't have to dress for her age, but on the contrary, he wanted her to slowly become a confident girl. With a wide smile on his face, he confidently said that everyone would definitely love Eliana and would consider her the castle's greatest treasure. The main character, with great surprise at her brother's words, noted that she would not have really wanted this. The guy stood up and suggested postponing the meeting with his uncle and told him the news that Richard was arriving. The heroine's brother also clarifies that Richard has taken on the duties of the high priest and would like to make sure that preparations for the ceremony are going well. The words about the ceremony reminded the girl of the damaged cup. After some thought, Robert suggested that he shouldn't show the relic to Richard in this form, because even though he was his friend, he knew how prim this guy was. Eliana merely confirmed her brother's words, knowing that he was the kind of person who could postpone the ceremony because of this. Having said that there was no need to worry, the young man reminded his sister about the magician, who was needed precisely for such cases. Suddenly, with a sharp jerk, someone's hand snatches the cup from Robert's hands. Not knowing what to say or how to proceed, Eliana's brother freezes in bewilderment. Behind him stood Richard, who was not at all happy to see the sacred relic in such a terrible state. On behalf of the priest's executor, he nevertheless decides to inquire what happened to the cup, to which he does not receive a proper explanation from his friend. After greeting, Eliana takes matters into her own hands and tries to explain the current situation, and also apologizes for what happened. Richard remains silent and turns his stern gaze to the girl, who shows all her remorse. Standing up for his sister, Robert says that the guy shouldn't bully his younger sister, to which he receives a response from his friend that he doesn't bully anyone. The brother, trying to cheer up the heroine with the words that many say that there are 3 most terrible weapons in the castle. And, pointing his finger at his friend, he says that Richard, with his facial expression, is one of these weapons. Seeing the guy's still stern expression, Eliana asks her brother to stop treating her so impolitely. But still, the girl herself understands that sometimes Richard can really look very creepy. After thinking for a bit, the main character realized that if she looked closely, the young man was actually very handsome. Seeing that Eliana does not take her eyes off his friend for a long time, the girl's brother tells her about it. Saying that he won't let the two of them be together, he hugs his sister tightly, showing all his jealousy. The young man points out that, although his friend is not a bad guy, despite his stern face, Eliana is too young to fall in love with him. Robert says that his friend wouldn't even dream of his little sister, while Eliana herself tries to calm him down. Seeing his sister's anxiety, the brother gently strokes her head and tells her that it was a joke. He says that the reason for the nonsense he said is because he is too happy, because he has such a wonderful sister and best friend, and also, perhaps, because he feels squeezed. By directly pointing out certain reasons, he asks not to take all his friend's words seriously. Ignoring this situation, Richard hands the cup over to the guy, noting that he is not so frivolous. Robert asks not to worry about the damaged relic, as he will go to Adam, who will fix everything. Suddenly, the guy gets the idea that after Eliana and Richard get married, his friend might become a member of the family, and he decides to tell his guests. Hearing this, Eliana screams with confusion on her face, while Richard continues to stand next to her with an impassive face. Repeating the question, Robert decides to clarify who exactly his friend will become for him, to which Richard only sighs deeply. Despite all this, the heroine's brother thought his idea was good enough, and he didn't understand what could be better than this. Even more embarrassed, the heroine was taken aback by her brother's words. The clear day quickly turned into a night with a dark sky in which the stars could be clearly seen. Trying to fall asleep, Eliana couldn't get rid of thoughts about the coming day because the time would come for the ceremony. Remembering the old days, the girl realized that after the terrible death of her parents, there were almost no incidents. The only thing that happened during this time was that she accidentally dropped a portrait of her parents, but her brother, albeit ineptly, was still able to fix the broken frame. With a smile on her face, the girl turns to her late parents and tells them what a caring brother she has, and that he will probably become a wonderful head of the fortress. The heroine's already half-asleep state is dispelled by a voice calling her name. A moment later, a strong male body lifts her from the bed and carries her in his arms to the other side of the room. Trying to say at least something, the girl is interrupted with a request to be quieter, and she realizes that it is Robert's voice. Frozen with fear and not understanding anything at all, Eliana only hears her brother's heavy breathing. Having carefully placed his sister in the closet, Robert asks her to sit quietly and not to give herself away under any circumstances. He tells her that Richard must come for her, and he is the only one who can be trusted. Filling the room with light, the moon also illuminated Robert, and Eliana clearly saw his wounded body. Even more misunderstandings arose in the girl's head, and she wanted to hear at least some kind of explanation from her brother. Unexpectedly grabbing his sister, Robert asked her again who she could trust. Even more frightened, she said Richard's name in a trembling voice. Hugging his sister tightly but tenderly, the brother said that Richard would be the only one who could protect her. By hugging Eliana even tighter, he only reminded her how much he loved her. Not understanding and not knowing what to do, the main character began to worry more and more about her brother. Having said that he wouldn't have to wait long, as it wouldn't take much time, Robert reminded him of his request and carefully closed the cabinet doors. Confused, Eliana, trying to understand the reason for Robert's strange behavior, could not find any other reason than the start of the war. Seeing the dress hanging nearby, thoughts of the good times she spent with her brother began to flash through the girl's head. She recalled how he asked her to wear this dress to the ceremony, assuring her that it suited her very well. With trembling hands, clutching and burying her face in the dress, Eliana kept thinking about the bloody wounds on his body. A voice loudly and angrily uttering her brother's name brought her back from her thoughts. With fury on his face, one of the knights swung at Robert, trying to apply as much force as possible in order to further injure him. The guy, holding the sword tightly in his hands, defended himself from the enemy's blow, and the clang of swords filled the entire room. He struck one of the knights with his sword and sent him flying to the other side of the room. Trying to find out whose doing this was, Robert asked in a stern voice who had sent them to him. The group, reminding them that they were knights of this fortress, pointed out that the boy should understand everything himself. Taking all the words as a lie, Robert tried to ensure that the knights did not touch his sister in any way. With the help of sharp movements, he deals a strong blow to one of the knights, not allowing them to get any closer to the cabinet. Hearing everything that was happening in the room, Eliana began to worry more and more about her brother. Thinking that she needed to get out as quickly as possible and help her brother, the girl reached for the closet door. Her brother's words about not going out under any circumstances flashed through the girl's head, and she stopped. The girl tried to somehow calm herself with the thought that her brother was the direct heir of the family, and there was no one who was stronger than him. At that moment, standing with heavy breathlessness, Robert grabbed the wound on his shoulder in order to somehow dull the pain and stop the bleeding. Standing in the room, in the middle of which lay the bloody body of one of the knights, the young man tried to at least rest a little in order to find new strength for the attack. Seeing that Robert was getting more and more difficult, one of the knights told him that the guy needed to stop holding the lands in his hands. Robert raised his head and said that the wind would remember the vile faces of the knights, and all the winds of the castle would curse them. Hearing this, the knight's eyes flashed with anger and indignation. Eliana shuddered in horror at the sight of the bloody sword that pierced the closet door. Through the gap left by the sword, the girl heard a loud crash and a conversation about a group of people trying to find out where she was. One of the knights, having said that the girl could not be found, suggested that Robert had sent his sister and the magician away before they arrived. Not wanting to hear anything, his commander issued an order for the remaining group to search the remaining places and, having found Eliana and the magician, kill them. Suddenly, it dawned on the main character that the drops of blood that had splashed her dress definitely belonged to her brother. Remembering the image of her brother, the girl, trying not to believe what had happened, thought that most likely she was mistaken, because this simply could not have happened. The stunned Eliana, staring into space, was called out by her uncle's voice, calling the girl by name. After asking if the heroine was there, he asked the girl to come out of the closet as quickly as possible, surprised that Robert had saved her. Again, thoughts about her brother's earlier words about Richard, who might be the only one who would protect her, appeared in the girl's head. Suddenly, the main character realized that her brother had said nothing at all about her uncle. Grinning, the uncle tried to convince Eliana that everything was okay now and she could trust him. The girl's thoughts flashed through what everyone had been saying, that the god of the winds had been watching over the children of her family for a long time, and the wind's tender care remained even after they grew up, protecting them from danger. Thinking about this, the girl could not understand why he did not protect her brother. Slowly opening the closet doors, the uncle called the heroine's name again. No longer knowing what to do, Eliana only wished that if the wind could not protect them, then let those who hurt Robert be accompanied only by the stinging wind for the rest of their lives. Turning around abruptly, the heroine's uncle saw one of his knights being killed and his body falling to the floor. In the center of the moonlit room stood Richard, holding a sword from which drops of blood were falling onto the floor. With a stern face, he turned to Joseph, the deputy head of the fortress, and asked him to stop for his own good. Standing there in complete bewilderment, the girl's uncle tries to find out from the guy what he is doing there, to which he is completely ignored in response. Seeing that Richard was moving towards the girl's hiding place, he shouted loudly for the young man to stop. Despite the deputy head of the fortress's violent reaction, the guy gets closer and closer to the closet. Crouching down a little, Richard sees the wounded body of his friend, all of whose clothes are covered in blood. Even more enraged, Eliana's uncle yells at the guy, asking him what he's even doing. After remaining silent for a while, the young man spoke of his intention to fulfill his duty by protecting everything connected with this family. Standing up and turning to the man, he advised him not to disturb him. Opening the closet doors, Richard announced that he had come for his bride and was going to pick her up. The girl sitting in the closet directed her depressed gaze downwards. With a furious face, Eliana's uncle tried to find out which bride they were talking about, since the girl was only 14 years old. Although he agreed that the girl was only 14 years old, the young man made it clear that it was only a matter of time. Reaching out and grabbing the heroine's hand, Richard pulled her towards him. Having emerged from the dark shelter and looking around, Eliana saw her brother's body leaning against the closet door, bleeding. Despite Richard's imperturbable gaze, in his thoughts he understood that the girl was in great pain because she was seeing her beloved brother like this for the last time, but she still needed to capture the end of Robert. Eliana looked at her murdered brother in horror and could not utter a word. With a furious expression on his face, Eliana's uncle yelled that he would not allow the marriage and reminded her that no outsider had the right to interfere in the internal affairs of the fortress. Pointing at Richard, the man ordered the knights to deal with him immediately. Seeing the attacking enemies, the young man asked the heroine to wait a little and took his sword out of its sheath. With swift movements, he inflicted mortal wounds on several knights. The confused deputy chief was shocked by the guy's abilities because he killed several people in the blink of an eye. Putting his sword back, Richard repeated that he did not claim ownership of the fortress. The girl's uncle shuddered after the boy's words, which made it clear that if they wanted to kill the mistress of the castle, they had to be prepared for the war to start. Seeing the girl's condition, he pulled her towards him and took her in his arms. Heading towards the exit, Richard passed through the remaining knights, who no longer tried to resist him. Trembling with rage, the man could not understand how he dared to do such a thing. Continuing to carry the main character in his arms, Richard left the castle. A girl ran out to meet them, anxiously asking where Robert was and if everything was okay with him. Ignoring the question, the guy told her that they had to return to the castle. The surprised girl asked again where Robert was, assuming that he had managed to escape alone. After a pause, the guy, with great reluctance, finally decides and tells that Robert is dead. Not believing Richard's words, she decides that she will bring him herself if he does not want to follow. The guy stopped Bella, saying that a situation in which a mage from one castle would try to enter another would look too strange and could lead to a war. The enraged girl screamed that she didn't care at all whether the war would start, because she was ready to start a massacre and finish off the deputy head of the fortress and his henchmen. Trying to calm the girl, Richard said that this land was dear to Robert. Unable to hold back her tears, Bella covered her face with her hands and began to sob bitterly. Seeing the girl's reaction, Richard decides to return to the castle. At this moment, Eliana wakes up and looks up with a barely alive gaze. She remembers her brother's words that the only one who can protect the girl will be Richard. Raising her head, the girl sees the face of the young man holding her and understands that Robert's words were true. A clear picture appears in the heroine's head of how the next day should have gone, if not for the whole situation. In her imagination, the girl scolds her brother for disappearing so suddenly and for her not being able to find him, and asks if he has forgotten what day it is. With a smile on his face, the young man unequivocally denies his sister's assumption, saying that today is the day of the title-giving ceremony. With a grin, he suggested that his sister really enjoyed dressing like a grown lady, and in his opinion, the girl was waiting for the ceremony only to show herself in all her glory. Embarrassed, Eliana shouted that everything was not at all as her brother thought and tried to come up with at least some kind of excuse, but Robert still continued to insist on his own, telling the girl not to pretend, because everything became clear from her face. Clarifying the reason the heroine wanted to come up with and not receiving the proper answer, the brother continues to be touched by his little sister. Seeing his sister's displeased expression, he asks her not to be offended. The girl embarrasses her brother by saying that she congratulates him with all her heart. After saying she won't say anything else, she leaves, saying she'll see her brother later at the ceremony. Stopping the heroine, Robert embraces her with his strong arms. With tenderness in his words, he says that he loves her more than anything in the world. Realizing that it was just a part of her imagination, the girl tearfully thinks about how at that moment she answered her brother that she also loved him very much. Continuing to carry Eliana in his arms, Richard and the tearful Bella walk further and further away from the castle full of ill-wishers. Many people say that God has two viceroys among people, the king and the high priest. The position of high priest is passed down through the family of saints, but the king had to be found through human wisdom. While looking over the candidates with his divine nonsense, the high priest noticed one of the castle owners, and he nominated a truly outstanding person for the position of ruler. The king, realizing that he was the viceroy of God, brought only benefit to his subjects. Even though the state was flourishing and everyone was living in abundance, people whose pockets were already filled to the brim began to want more and began to give up everything they had for selfish purposes. Besides all this, people have also lost faith in God. By selling and acquiring power, by receiving money for fraud, people have long since lost the desire to seek a king sent by God. Now, the castle owners began to choose a king who would meet their expectations. In the fortress where Richard was the head of the castle, rumors were spreading that the head was behaving strangely. For no apparent reason, he left the castle in the middle of the night with a magician, and when he returned with some girl. One of the knights even suggested that this girl was Richard's daughter, whom he had been hiding all this time. And even though others told him that their master was only 18 years old and there could be no talk of a daughter, he continued to insist on his opinion. Another knight standing nearby suggested that the girl was the illegitimate child of the previous head. Having played his words, which sounded a lot like condemnation, over in his head, the guy just laughed, saying that this couldn't happen because the members of this family were very disciplined and followed all the rules. Having confirmed his comrade's words that they were indeed devoted to their work, one of the knights noticed a familiar guy walking towards them. Seeing the expression on the face of the knight approaching them, he inquired about it, but received a rather unclear answer. Once again, hearing the same question, the young man who came asked again about the girl that their master had brought. As he began to tell his story, the guys interrupted him with suggestions that the leader had killed the girl, to which he refused. All three were in complete shock from the words they heard, which said that the owner of the fortress had settled Eliana next to him. The boys exchanged glances and asked each other if this was the bedroom in which only the mistress of the castle could live. Stopping at the bedroom door, Richard knocked softly, letting the girl know that he wanted to enter the room. Opening the door, the guy saw Robert standing, his hand clinging to the curtain, looking at the sky. Turning around, Richard greeted his friend. He indignantly asked if his friend had really decided to leave him to die while he stood there with a shocked look. Robert scratched his head and reported that although he was not so easy to take, this time he really did go to another world. Having asked whether his friend really liked his little sister so much, he came a little closer to his friend. In answering his question, Richard made it clear that his concern for Eliana was only due to the fact that the girl was the main treasure for his best friend. Smiling, Robert put his hand on the guy's shoulder and said that he barely survived and crawled here only because of his help. After asking his friend if he was happy that he had survived, the guy asked him to thank him for it. With a smile on his face, Richard said thank you in a calm voice. Robert's image dissolved, and the guy turned his gaze to Eliana sitting on the bed. Seeing Richard, the heroine turned her gaze to him. Having said that the girl had finally woken up, the young man came a little closer to the bed. Noting that this might be a bit harsh, Richard decided to clarify a few things right away and informed the girl that they were in his castle. Exhaling, he clarified to the girl that for now she would be here as his fiancée. Surprised, the heroine repeated the guy's words, which meant that this would continue for a certain period of time. Richard explained his words by saying that he would soon ask His Majesty for permission to marry, and Eliana would become the mistress of the fortress. At the same time, he clarified that the permission also required the cooperation of her family's castle, but there would be no problem with this, since they had no reason to refuse. Having said that after this, as part of his family, the girl would be completely under his protection, Richard suddenly fell silent. Turning to Eliana, he informed her that in order to carry out all this, her consent was necessary. Sitting in complete bewilderment, the girl asked the guy again about her consent and, lowering her eyes, fell silent. Richard explained to the girl that he did not have the strength to come up with a better plan, but if she wanted to refuse, he would try to find another option. After asking Eliana to think carefully about his proposal, he said that if any questions arose, she could come to his office at any time. Having noticed the girl's clothes, he suggested that they first resolve this issue. Looking at the sleeves of her shirt hanging from her arms, she said that she didn't care at all what she wore, and that even clothes that were once worn by servants would do. The girl was very surprised after Richard interrupted her and said that there were no servants in this castle. The young man told her that the first rule of their castle is that everyone must act independently and autonomously, but since now is a special situation, after the girl has rested, Bella will help her. Eliana looked down and asked why they were being so kind to her. Clutching the blanket in her hand, she said that she had heard that receiving help from the castle's head mage was a great honor, and the fact that they trusted her surprised her. Interrupting the girl with his words that Robert would have done exactly the same, he shocks the heroine even more. Richard clarified that if the same situation as her brother had happened to him, his friend would also protect what he wanted to protect. At that moment, Eliana realized that there was absolute trust between her brother and Richard, which nothing could destroy. Getting out of bed, she told the young man that her brother's last words were that the only person she could rely on was Richard. Coming a little closer, she said that it was precisely because of this that there could only be one possible answer to Richard's proposal. Realizing that the girl had agreed to his proposal, the guy looked at the girl in surprise. Thanking the girl for such a quick response, he bowed, asking her to take care of him, to which Eliana did the same in response. The girl looked at the young man in surprise after he said that until she came of age, he would fully ensure her protection. Seeing the surprise on the heroine's face, Richard explained that this was just a fictitious marriage. He explained to the girl that if she met a man with whom she wanted to be together, he would make every effort to ensure that she left his family without consequences. The heroine asked herself the question in her head, going over the words the guy had said about the person she would want to be with. The girl's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the door opening sharply. Standing in complete bewilderment, Eliana and Richard looked with surprised eyes at the girl who, upon entering the room, immediately noticed that they were both already on their feet. Changing his expression to a more stern one, the guy reminded Bella that he had asked her to knock before entering. In response, Bella confirmed with a serious face that everything was exactly like that. Seeing Eliana, joy shone on the girl's face, and she asked if everything was okay with the girl. She explained her question by saying that the local air could be unfriendly to strangers. Eliana responded by saying that she had immediately settled in, to which the girl agreed with her, since Robert also immediately fell in love with the local air. Trying to find something behind her back, Bella said that she had prepared a gift for the girl. Showing a sloppy sweater with lots of loose threads, she said she had done it herself, hoping the girl would like it. The magician's friendly face filled with anger after Richard pulled at the sleeve of his jacket and tore the seam. After yelling at the guy for ruining all her efforts, Bella heard Richard say that he didn't want clothes to be bullied like that anymore. Seeing their quarrel, Eliana says that she will put on a sweater. Bella, delighted, asks if the girl will do this for her, to which Eliana, agreeing, replies that she is a little cold. With a smile from ear to ear, Bella sends the heroine to change her clothes as quickly as possible. Bella's face fills with horror after she sees her creation on the girl. Despite her unkempt appearance, the main character still thanks the magician, saying that she feels better now. Still looking with confusion at how the clothes fit the girl, Bella asks how Richard allowed the little girl to be abused like that, to which he replies that now the girl herself knows that it cannot be called an effort. After asking the guy for forgiveness, he interrupts her with the words that she should apologize to the main character, and admitting her guilt, the girl apologizes to Eliana. Having asked to wait a little, Bella confidently says that she will definitely find something better. Richard told Eliana that if she needed anything, she could speak to her at any time, and Bella, standing next to him, confirmed his words, indicating that she would get everything for her. Eliana's eyes lit up after hearing this, and she promised to do exactly as they asked. After making sure that the heroine had gone to bed to rest, Richard and Bella left the room. Carefully closing the door to the room, the magician heard the guy's request to find out about Adam. Having recognized the familiar name, the girl asks the head of the fortress whether he is talking about the mage from the castle of Eliana's family, and receives a positive answer. Reminding her that it was the magician who had approached them with a request for help, he noted that he could not find him on the castle grounds, but due to the fact that the knights were also looking for Adam, there was a possibility that he remained alive. Hearing that Bella would try to find out something about him, Richard asked to report this when Eliana was not with him. After asking about the reason for this decree, the girl hears from Richard that Eliana herself should have questions about this, and this will become her first task. In the office, completely illuminated by moonlight, Richard sat at his desk. Remembering the moment when Bella continued to dissuade him, claiming that the girl was only 14, and that in his place Robert would have acted differently. After thinking for a while alone, the guy realized that his friend would have immediately told the whole truth to his little sister. Looking at the photograph on the table, old memories came flooding back to Richard. Here he is, very small, standing in the rain near two graves. With a trembling voice, he begs his parents not to go and leave him alone. Continuing to immerse himself in his thoughts, the guy realizes that he and Bella cannot be together forever. All the guy's thoughts were interrupted after he heard someone crying, "Eliana." Richard ran out of the bedroom at breakneck speed and headed to the girl's room. When he ran up, he saw a girl sitting there, almost choking on her tears. The guy realized that the heroine had come to a realization, and at that moment the whole world seemed to her like just a huge, dark closet. The girl felt herself in a place filled with horror and despair, in which she could not do anything. Remembering how he had pulled the girl out of her hiding place last time, the guy extended his hand. Taking his hand, Eliana pressed it to her face. The guy looked at the girl in surprise and stood there, completely unsure of how to act in this situation. Richard was even more surprised when Eliana pressed herself against his chest and grabbed the fabric of his vest with trembling hands. Having hugged the heroine, Richard realized that perhaps being inside this dark place, the girl was simply waiting for someone to rescue her from there. Already in the morning, sitting on the bed, the guy was again immersed in his thoughts. The situation that happened yesterday at night was clearly reflected in his head. Eliana repeated Richard's name over and over again, ignoring all the boy's words about him being there. Holding the girl tighter, the young man could not understand why Robert left this poor thing with him and left. Already in the morning, Richard, knocking while standing near the door, received the girl's answer that he should come in. Entering the room, he saw Eliana standing in the middle of the room in a beautiful image. After greeting him, the girl thanked him for the clothes, saying that she really liked them. Marveling at the girl's beauty, the guy could not utter a single word for a moment. Richard handed the girl the boots he had found in the castle, thinking that she might need other footwear. He was glad that Eliana was satisfied and thanked him. Thinking about how the girl's condition had changed, Richard smiled. Looking out the window, Eliana asked permission to walk around the castle. Having agreed, the young man asked the heroine whether she had rested enough in her room. When the girl turned around, for a moment Richard thought that his friend was standing in front of him. After looking at the head, the girl said that she would like to walk on her feet. Peeking out from behind the door, Eliana confirmed that, unlike her family's castle, there really were no servants here. Thinking about who was doing the cleaning, the girl imagined Richard cleaning. Having cleared the image from her head, she thought that this couldn't be happening because the boss must be very busy. Having reached the end of the corridor and thinking about which direction she should go, the heroine turned right. The girl remembered her brother's words about how if you don't know where to go, you shouldn't stand still, but rather choose one of the sides. Even then, she wondered about the situation when there was nothing at all in the chosen direction, but her brother reminded her that she could always return to the beginning of the path. With a smile on his face, he assured her that all the winds of this world were watching over the children of their family and dispelled her worries. Having encountered another turn, the heroine again decided to go right. As Eliana climbed the steps, she got closer and closer to the light. The stairs led the girl to the roof, and she saw the most beautiful view from above. Feeling a cool breeze passing through her body, the heroine realized that it was the wind that brought her here. With an embarrassed expression on her face, she thanked him loudly. Suddenly, a voice from behind loudly asked who was there. Turning around, Eliana saw a pink-haired guy who demanded that the girl introduce herself. The young man fell silent after the girl turned to him. Someone's hand grabbed his shoulder, and Eliana saw in front of her two guys with absolutely identical appearances. Both guys were surprised at where the boss could have dragged such a beautiful girl from, and it was incomprehensible that she fell into the hands of a cold-blooded beast. Having carefully examined the two guys, the girl mentally assumed that they were twins. One of the brothers said that they belonged to the knightly order of this fortress, and his name was William. With a smile on his face, his brother introduced himself as Charles. Surprised that the boys were knights of this fortress, she looked at them with delight. After bowing, Eliana greeted and introduced herself to the brothers. With a smile on her face, she said that she was very glad to meet them. Looking at the girl, William and Charles could do nothing but be touched. When she heard the brothers offer that if the leader touched her with even a finger, the girl could tell them about it, she refused, saying that everything was fine. Charles was suddenly surprised by the rapid spread of rumors about the girl, which seemed to have already reached the elders. Turning around, the girl saw the elders, who were already near the entrance to the fortress. Remembering that in her family's castle, the elders and the head of the fortress gathered to make important decisions, she realized that the meeting was probably somehow connected with her. The brothers assumed that the matter for which they had called the meeting was of great importance, since the elders had brought their daughters with them, to which Eliana asked for an explanation. Richard and Charles spoke about the characters of the elders' daughters, who seem even colder and harsher than those of the girls' fathers. Both guys explained that if these girls start talking, even the head himself won't be able to control them. And so Eliana and Richard stand in front of those very cold-blooded girls and their fathers. One of the chairmen decided not to believe the rumors until he saw everything with his own eyes. But when he saw the girls standing in front of him, he realized that the rumors were true. Richard said that they were waiting for the elders because it seemed to him that they should definitely arrive at this time. When the chairman began to scold them for not having been informed or for not having their opinions taken into account, they took this as a sign of disregard for the elders. Listening to all the discontent, the guy looked at Eliana with a wet look. Before entering the room, the girl told him not to worry, because this was not the first time she had participated in the Council of Elders. Turning to the door, Eliana invited them in. He immediately remembered Robert's words that, despite her age, his sister was quite calm, and he was proud of her. Looking after the walking girl, he was surprised by her confidence. Richard only smiled after personally verifying his friend's words. All his thoughts were dispelled by the enraged cry of one of the elders. Demanding to say at least something, his face filled with anger and fury. Looking at the girl and seeing her nod, Richard decided to explain the whole situation to the elders. With confidence in his words, he reported the death of the heir to the castle, which belonged to the girl's family. Explaining that this was the reason the ceremony had been postponed, Richard felt that the preparations for the ceremony had been poor, as there was no heir to receive the title. Sympathizing, one of the chairmen put forward his own suggestion, pointing out that the other heir, confirming the elders' guess that it had happened unexpectedly and he had failed to report what had happened, Richard apologized. Finally, all the elders understood the girl's circumstances and the reason why she was here. One of the girls, not letting her father finish, asked him not to overexert himself with the remaining objections. Having asked permission, she demanded a proper explanation from the head of the castle about what had happened. Richard, stating that further comment would be unnecessary, did not elaborate. Approaching Eliana, who stood there in bewilderment, and looking at her carefully, the group of girls stood with a dissatisfied look. Looking at the chairman's daughters, Richard was ready to listen to all their objections. Grabbing Eliana by the shoulders, one of the girls expressed dissatisfaction about how they could put such terrible clothes on her. Hearing this, the heroine stood in complete bewilderment. Other girls also accused Richard of lacking taste and could not understand how one could ruin a pretty face. With pity on their faces, they sympathized with the girl for the fact that she found herself in an unfamiliar place, and in such cold weather, she probably put on shoes without socks, which is why all her toes were most likely frozen. The girl gently took the heroine by the face, and amazed by her sweet face, offered to give up the chapter and become her bride. Trying to convince Eliana, she said that she had a lot of money, since she managed several large enterprises, and, if the heroine wanted, the girl could teach her how to run a business. At this point, the chairmen were talking about their daughters, whose expectations about the lack of decent clothing in the fortress were justified. Eliana decided to take a look at Richard and saw the chairman's daughters telling the head that they wanted to grab him by the collar upon his arrival. Despite the guy's request to calm down, the girl still continued to scold him. The quarrel stopped the moment everyone heard Eliana's laughter. The girl laughed, thinking that if her brother saw this scene, he would definitely laugh. Richard was pleasantly surprised when Eliana said that although she was worried, fortunately all the members of the congregation turned out to be wonderful people. Eliana asked him if there was any information from her family's castle. The guy said that, apart from the information, the ceremony was postponed due to insufficient preparation. There was no news. Then the heroine thought about her uncle's decision that had not yet been made. Having confirmed this, the head suggested that perhaps he had prepared thoroughly, having soldered several scenarios. The girl lowered her head and told how she heard her brother ask the people who attacked them about who they were loyal to. Richard spoke of the possibility that the knights did not belong to the castle, since the leader himself could not help but recognize his subordinates. The girl assumed that her uncle had brought in outside forces, and if she and her brother were gone, then the force of the wind would surely turn to the deputy head of the castle. The boy's thoughts began to understand that the power of the wind was passed down through a direct family line, and even among direct descendants, this ability only chose one. The person in whose body she appeared becomes the head of the castle and receives all the honors and at the same time responsibilities. Because Eliana left the Land of Winds, the person who is most likely to have the power of wind appear in her will be the deputy head of the fortress. The heroine didn't understand how someone like her uncle, who killed her brother, could gain power. The girl asked if there were other bodies and received an answer from the young man that no one was hurt. Richard warned that it was too early to relax, because those who knew the truth would not be left alone. Eliana was very disappointed that she couldn't help in any way. Knowing that she could only make things worse and put others in danger, this would be the best decision for her. Stepping forward, Eliana noted that everything was turning out strangely, because in order to untie her hands, she would need Richard's family name. By changing her last name, the girl will no longer have freedom to make decisions, and such a change will probably force her uncle to address her differently. Having stopped, the guy asked the heroine if she had something in mind. Turning to the guy, she agreed with his assumption. With a smile on her face, Eliana said that if it weren't for this, she would have no reason to be here now. Wiping her face with a towel, the heroine walked along the deserted corridor to which she had already become accustomed. Thinking that she had finally settled in a new place, the girl was delighted. A sudden cry asking her to stop immediately stopped Eliana. Standing at the door, she heard words that if Richard did not agree to the condition, the girl would refuse to be his magician. Recognizing Bella's voice, Eliana continued to listen to the quarrel, based on the fact that the head of the castle did not want to let the mage go so that she could kill everyone. Raising her hand to the door handle to open it, she stopped after the indignant girl's words about the information related to her family's castle. Eliana was shocked by Bella's question about how, after this, Richard could still consider himself Robert's friend. convincing the mage that even if she killed everyone, neither the temple nor the King of Wisdom would sit idly by. Richard only received ridicule from her. With fury in her eyes, Bella screamed that she would not be afraid of anything they did to her. Standing at the entrance, Eliana heard a scream from the guy, who angrily asked the girl about how she was trying to change anything with her screaming. The magician's dissatisfaction with the fact that they dared to declare Robert's death, saying that he himself had taken his own life, left the girl perplexed. Continuing to worry about the consequences of this statement, she asked Richard if he really didn't care about his friend that much. Not hearing an answer and realizing the conversation was pointless, Bella turned to leave the room. At the last moment, Richard explained to her that if he let her go so easily, then of the three of them, he would be the only one who would remain alive in this world. Gritting her teeth, the girl remained silent and left the room. Leaving the room, she saw Eliana standing outside the door all this time. Bella looked in surprise at the heroine, who was looking coldly at the floor. Holding each other tightly in an embrace, both girls could not hold back their tears. Richard explained to the main character that Bella had only just realized that Robert was dead. After apologizing for his mage's impudence, he explained that this girl was completely unable to control her emotions. Since Eliana was only happy to help Bella, she didn't need words of gratitude. She always considered people who couldn't hide their feelings to be, on the contrary, very sweet. Richard's words brought a smile to his face. Sitting down on the bed next to the girl, he remembered how Robert had said the same thing, but in a more rude manner. Then her brother thought it was cute, because you could tell at a glance what was hidden in her little head. Seeing Bella's reaction, he noted that she was now ashamed of this, but the girl only denied it, saying that he really made her angry. Richard, sitting with them, listened to all this with an imperturbable expression on his face. Remembering the expression on the mage's face at that moment, the leader wanted to assume that she had very strong feelings for Robert, which were most likely mutual. Eliana managed to catch his thought before he even finished speaking. At the same time, she asked Richard if he was going to let Mrs. Bella go, in response to which she received a question about whether she herself would be against it. Eliana agreed because if the mage or the leader resisted Joseph, they could be in danger. Confirming the girl's words, Richard added the possibility that in such a situation, the King of Wisdom or the High Priest could also intervene. Having agreed, the heroine got out of bed and said that everything would be different with her. If she, who has her family's blood, were to challenge her uncle, it would not escalate into a war between the two fortresses. Eliana believed that she was the one who should start the fight. Richard tried to convince the girl, saying that Robert would not want his sister to fight, so either he or Bella should make Joseph pay. Disagreeing with these words, Eliana said that she wanted this herself. Her uncle, to whom she had been attached since childhood, killed her brother for the sake of power and the place of leadership, so even though Robert only wanted her happiness, she will not cloud her soul with falsehood. For this reason, she turns to Richard to give her his last name. Eliana holds out her hand and with a sparkle in her eyes asks him to take the guy as her wife and receives his consent. Having said that, if his wife is one who desires truth and suffering, he tenderly kisses the heroine's hand. Richard looked into the girl's eyes and with all seriousness announced his intentions to do everything to achieve the desired result. A cry from one of the elders, indignant at the fact that the chief and the young lady were leaving for the lands of wisdom the next day, was heard throughout the fortress. After confirming what had been said, Richard explained that they were going to get permission to marry and take vows in the temple. Hearing these words, the elders were already ready to pray before Eliana, so that she could connect her life with such an old and pathetic man. At the same time, Richard received a scolding from one of them for not giving the one he wanted to marry a single outfit. Having heard all the condemnations, the head of the fortress thought about it. When all the chairmen saw the boy's reaction, they decided to go and beg the young lady for him and ask her not to abandon someone like him. The elders threatened Richard that if the girl left him, their daughters would take their places, and they would not care about his complaints that this would no longer be a council of elders. They really hoped that in the future he would take care of the young lady and warned the guy that they would keep a close eye on him and that he should not forget about it. Richard just stood there and didn't know what to say to all these warnings and threats. As Eliana walked down the corridor, a voice called out to her by name. Turning around, she saw Robert coming out of the elder's office. When Eliana asked him if he had been scolded too much, she heard the answer that he had taken them as trifles. Richard noted how late it was and how it was time to hurry to the rooms. The next day was expected to be quite challenging, so the guy advised getting a good night's sleep. Having agreed, the embarrassed girl asked if she could ask him for something. Dressed in a beautiful bright blue dress and matching bows adorning her short hair, Eliana announced that she was ready. Looking at the door leading to Richard's room, she thought that the head of the castle had probably already finished changing his clothes. Eliana thought that it would be better not to use that door and knocked on the door of the castle head's office. At that moment, Richard, already prepared, came out and greeted the girl. Seeing the young man with braided hair, she stood silently and could not take her eyes off him. The silence was broken by Richard calling Eliana again. He agreed with the girl's comment about his hair being pulled back. Richard was ready to return everything back if the heroine did not like his hairstyle, but she, on the contrary, stopped him with the words that it looked very beautiful. Not expecting her to tell the truth, Eliana felt embarrassed by her words. Having invited the heroine into the office, Richard heard her ask where Bella was now. He noted that it would be strange if this girl had not managed to oversleep. Calling out to Eliana, he asked her to come to the chair with a mirror standing opposite it. Hearing the question, Eliana could not understand why this was necessary. Richard carefully began to comb the girl's hair, who at that moment was thinking about what a mess her head seemed to be. The heroine noted that she never thought about how difficult it is to care for short hair. Having said that everything was fine and that she would quickly get used to it, the guy remembered yesterday evening. Confident that she wanted to cut off the length due to the difficulty in styling her hair, the heroine sat in front of him. Cutting her hair herself proved to be very difficult, so she turned to Richard. After thinking for a bit, he finally agreed to her request. Eliana felt like she was at home while someone else was combing her hair like this. From childhood, her mother and father combed her hair, and when they became busy, servants from the castle helped her. At the same time, her brother often combed her hair. Clenching her palms, Eliana began to think that now there was no one next to her, and now no one would do this again. But when she looked up, she saw Richard carefully arranging her hair. He asked her if anything was bothering her. With a slight smile on her face, Eliana, saying that nothing was bothering her, spoke about how for a moment she felt as if she had returned home. Richard also decided to talk about how he felt in the role of Robert. After thinking about it, the heroine chuckled at this because her brother never combed her hair so carefully. Richard felt that if Robert had learned that he had been the one who had cut off his sister's hair, his friend would certainly not have been able to contain his rage. When the girl denied it because she knew how much her brother loved his friend, the head said that her brother always bragged more about his little sister. Eliana couldn't argue with that and remembered how embarrassed she felt at such moments. The guy said that she always smiled when she was around Robert, making Eliana freeze in place. After the heroine asked if she was smiling, Richard agreed and immediately remembered her brother's words. One day, looking at his sister, Robert commented on how radiant her smile was. He believed that with her beautiful smile she made the people watching her happy. After these words were spoken, Richard smiled and a drop of embarrassment colored his cheeks a little pink. Having heard everything that her brother said about her then, the embarrassed Eliana's face turned red. Covering it with her hands, she felt embarrassed and wanted to hide somewhere. Trying to calm the heroine's worries, he also said that her brother had talked about more than just this and offered to listen. Refusing to listen, Eliana asked him to tell her a little later. In response to this request, he told her that he could tell her everything at any time, whenever she asked. After Richard had completely combed the heroine's hair, she thanked him. Eliana thought that no one would ever comb her hair again because of its short length, but now, thinking about it, she only smiled. The heroine was very happy that Richard was so kind to her. After the leader said that everything was ready, Eliana looked at herself in the mirror. Seeing the braided hairstyle, the girl was surprised at how beautiful it looked. She blushed and clarified to Richard that she had meant how great her hair looked when pulled back, not herself in general. Looking at the heroine, Richard only grinned at her words. Suddenly, a breathless Bella opened the door to the room and, loudly apologizing, she asked if she was late. Having reported that the girl was late, Richard added that it was to their mutual relief, and Eliana supported his words. Bella was very surprised by this and demanded an explanation, but Richard and Eliana, looking at each other, ignored her words. Looking at these two, Bella could not understand why she was not aware of the events. She hugged the heroine tightly and was surprised at how more and more she reminded her of Robert. Noticing that Eliana had gotten a haircut and how it suited her, the magician asked her about it, to which the heroine, agreeing, told her how difficult it was for her to take care of her hair. Richard urged the girls on, saying that they needed to leave soon, and Bella, after clarifying whether she was thinking correctly, told them about her task, which was that she only needed to transport the two of them to the entrance to the lands of wisdom. Pointing to a spot, she asked Richard and Eliana to stand there next to each other. She brought the two even closer and pointed out to them that in order to look like true lovers going to get permission to be engaged, they would need to put on their most tender looks. Bella said that when they were getting ready to go back, they could call her at any time, to which Richard expressed his gratitude to her. Reminding him that she was a magician, the girl raised her hands in front of her. Already beginning to gain strength, Bella told him that upon her return, the head would be in serious trouble from the elders and their daughters. With a straight face, Richard asked to tell them that he was wrong. Smiling and saying that she would definitely pass it on, the mage directed her power at Richard and Eliana. After the flashes illuminated the entire room, the heroine slowly opens her eyes. Finding herself in a completely different room, she hears Richard explain that they are in a guest room at the entrance to the Land of Wisdom. Looking around, Eliana realized that she had already been here in the past with her brother or uncle, and nothing had changed since then. Suddenly, someone's voice called out to Richard and Eliana. A man in closed clothing stood in front of them and asked them to follow him, and also informed them that as soon as they entered the temple, they would receive more information from the priest and priestess. Having agreed, Richard turned his gaze to the heroine. Eliana stood there, completely at a loss, her gaze fixed on the floor. The moment with her brother, who asked her if she knew why this place was called the Land of Wisdom, began to clearly appear in her head. Having answered this question by saying that the King of Wisdom lived here, she decided that her brother took her for a fool for asking this. Hearing her brother's laughter after her answer, she looked at him. Taking his sister's hand, Robert complimented her on naming one of the reasons. Walking further and further behind the stranger, Eliana heard Richard ask if she knew why this place was called the Land of Wisdom. The girl replied that this was because the King of Wisdom lived here, but at the same time she added that everything that was here was created and grown by the efforts of ordinary people. Agreeing with her, the guy noted that people are capable of creating harmonious reconstructions several times taller than themselves, so this can be considered a manifestation of genius. Noticing that the heroine was flying in her thoughts, he called out her name. With an embarrassed look on her face, she apologized for this. Seeing the girl's confused state, Richard didn't know at all how to help her. Coming closer, he gently touched Eliana's hand. The girl, struck by this, suddenly raised her head and looked at the young man in surprise. A smile appeared on her face, and she thought about how everything was so warm with him. Taking Richard's hand, Eliana felt as if the wind in the Land of Wisdom had died down, as if comforting her. The guy was surprised that the heroine could feel the wind, although she said that she might just be mistaken. The young man spoke about the possibility that perhaps she was not mistaken, because when the power begins to flow, the object of this power is felt differently. When Eliana asked if he had felt something similar, the leader explained that he also felt the essence of darkness, just as her family felt the essence of wind. Seeing the girl's surprised face, Richard began to talk about how he first felt this power, being a little younger than the heroine. Opening his eyes in the middle of the night, he saw pitch darkness flowing around him. Realizing that she was enveloping his body, he jumped out of bed and headed to the window to open it. At that moment, the realization came to him that his parents were no longer in this world. Having heard about everything that Richard had to go through, the heroine hanged herself. Since his parents usually returned uninjured after getting rid of monsters, he couldn't even think about it. Trying to somehow lighten the mood, Eliana said that she had heard that his parents were very strong, and Richard agreed with her. He said that this was precisely the reason for all the efforts of the elders to prevent his parents from quarreling. If this happened, the main wall of the fortress would tremble from their strife. Amazed by this, Eliana asked to clarify whether his parents fought with real swords, and agreeing, he told about his mother, who also shot a bow. With pride in his words, he reported that her mastery of the bow was known both in the fortress and beyond, and his father boasted of his wife's abilities almost at every turn. Touched by how nice his parents were, Eliana continued to listen to the boy's stories. Suddenly, she thought about the possibility of her learning to use a weapon too. The heroine explained this desire to the young man by saying that she wanted to become at least a little stronger. Trying to convince Eliana that the weapon would not immediately make her strong, he explained to her that she could achieve one of the directions of power herself. But in reality, Richard believed that the heroine already had enough strength. Eliana was embarrassed by Richard's genuine kindness to her. To Richard's gratitude, she exclaimed that everything she said was the pure truth. Because of the girl's loud words, the stranger leading them turned to her. Noticing this, Eliana lowered her tone and noted that even though the leader was joking with her, he was still sincerely worried about her. Gently taking the guy in both hands and smiling, she said what a warm person he was. After these words, the young man looked at the heroine with an excited look. Suddenly, the stranger called them over, asking for forgiveness for interrupting the conversation between two lovers. Upon arrival at the temple, Richard and Eliane were informed that they would now separate to receive sacred permission, and each of them, while waiting in their own place, would have to cleanse their body and mind. They will not be allowed to see each other until the next morning, so the words they would like to say to each other, they will have to say now. Taking the girls' hands, Richard said that they would see each other later. Eliana, opening her palms, was surprised by the neatly folded piece of paper lying in them. After asking her to be a little quieter, Richard told her to read the note when she was alone in the room. With a smile on her face, Eliana, pressing her hands with the note inside to her chest, thanked the young man. The guy said goodbye to the heroine and followed the man leading him. Turning back, he looked at the heroine walking in the opposite direction. Because force could not be used here without permission, Richard would have no way of protecting the girl if she were in danger. Having convinced himself that everything would be fine, the guy waited for the next day, when his anxiety would definitely disappear. Upon arrival at the room, the attendant explained the order of serving food, and since breakfast time had already passed, the next meal was planned after the afternoon prayer. Hearing words of gratitude from Eliana, she simply ignored it. She said that as soon as the girl heard the bell ring, she should drink holy water in the prayer room to let God into her. Eliana was taken aback by the words that made it clear to her that there were 3 bell strikes in total, the second of which signified the beginning of the prayer, and the third its end. Earlier, the priestess accompanying her added to all this words about the ringing of bells on a moonlit night and at dawn, when the moon fades. Since the time for afternoon prayer was approaching, she advised her to take a bath as soon as possible, as it was an obligatory part before entering the room. When Eliana asked whether it was necessary to bathe before the dawn prayer, the priestess agreed. The heroine was completely perplexed when she heard the argument about the need to thoroughly clean her dirty and mortal body. Having said that she would take her to the place of sacred permission the next morning, she was about to leave, but Eliana stopped her. The priestess turned around with a frown on her face and looked at her with fury. Embarrassed, the heroine apologized and asked if she could take a walk in the garden. Looking sideways at the girl, she noted that she shouldn't wander around the sacred temple with such a dirty body, and if she had no more questions, then she could go. The dumbfounded Eliana could not understand her words, because no strange aroma emanated from her. Noticing a slight sticky feeling on her body, she decided to wash herself as quickly as possible. Carefully closing the door, Eliana entered the bathroom. As she slowly lowered her foot into the bath, she couldn't help but notice how cold the water was. Now the words about the local priests bathing in cold water made their full truth clear. A little attached to the temperature of the water, Eliana thought how similar she was to all the cold-bloodedness of the people in this together. Shivering from the cold after her bath, Eliana sat by the brightly blazing fireplace. She never thought that warmth was so important, because if she had not finished washing so quickly, she would have frozen to death. The heroine couldn't stop repeating in her head the words about her dirty body, which needed to be thoroughly washed. Remembering that very look, she could not remember ever being looked at with such condemnation. But realizing this, she was not surprised, since in her family's castle everyone was very friendly to her. The only times she was scolded were when she and her brother would wander into the kitchen and eat all the desserts. There were also times when people got angry at them for setting fire to autumn leaves in the garden. Eliana always hid behind her little brother when he was scolded for his latest rash actions. Elder Alfred was unhappy that he was also involving the young lady, for whom he was responsible, in his games. Remembering the chairman, Eliana wondered if everything was okay with him. Looking at the dresser where the note from Richard lay, she finally decided to read it. Taking the unfolded piece of paper in her hand, she read the guy's words about how she shouldn't take everything he said and did to heart, since the temple usually wasn't very friendly towards people from the outside world. The young man made Eliana smile by saying that they had no right to judge her, because they didn't know what a wonderful person she really was. Clutching Richard's message to her chest, Eliana marveled at all his kindness. Before, she was always afraid of this guy and froze at his every glance, never allowing herself to look into those eyes. After thinking for a while, the girl began to regret that she had not been able to understand what kind of person he really was before. The bell calling for afternoon prayer dispelled the heroine's thoughts. After looking at the door and putting the note aside, she entered the room specially designated for prayer, without closing the door all the way so as to see at least something. Looking around, Eliana noticed that it was so cramped inside, and there was not even a window through which even a single ray of light would fall into this darkness. This atmosphere reminded her more and more of the very closet in which she found herself. The panicking heroine began to reassure herself that she shouldn't remember the horrors that happened back then while in the temple, and at the moment, what was important to her was that she return home with Richard's last name. As she closed the door and began to approach the prayer site, Eliana noticed how the wind, blowing from nowhere, seemed to envelop her body from all sides. Realizing that he did not want to let her go, Eliana apologized to the wind because she was obliged to go through this marriage ceremony, no matter what. Beginning to say a prayer, the heroine took the holy water in her hands and carefully sipped it in order to let God into herself. While the girl was praying, Joseph burst into her room full of anger. Hearing her uncle's voice calling her name, Eliana stood frozen in horror. Having dropped the sacred water, the girl turned around and saw him standing in front of her. Tears of fear came to the girl's eyes, and she covered her trembling lips with her hand, trying not to scream. With a grinning face, he noted how long it had been since he had seen his beloved niece. When Eliana and Robert were children, they adored their uncle. Despite his parents' prohibitions, he always brought their favorite sweets. The little brother and sister kept asking him to put them in his arms so that he could throw them high. At that time, they thought that their uncle was the best person and could not even imagine that he would treat them this way in the future. When their uncle lifted Eliana or her brother up, a bright laugh was heard. After the death of their parents, Richard and Eliana, standing at the graves, did not understand at all what they would do. The uncle who appeared behind them spoke of his brother and his wife as wonderful people who were respected by everyone around them. Calling the children to him, he hugged them tightly, and thus calmed them down at least a little. But now, Eliana was no longer that little child, and when she saw her uncle, she trembled in fear. Continuing to look at him in horror, she could not understand how he had ended up here at all. The heroine addressed him as uncle, but quickly corrected herself, calling him by his first name. Joseph felt a little sad, remembering how sweet she had been to him before, and now she was cold as ice, but he admitted that it would be much more correct this way. Coming closer, he gently touched the girl's hair and began to be surprised at how diligently her brother protected her. With a smirk on his face, he said that he had guessed about his plan to save his sister, even if it meant giving his life. After Joseph said that he would never have thought of Robert's bad idea of giving her to that monster, Eliana looked at him with a shocked expression on her face. Throwing her hand away from her hair, she refused to let him insult Richard's family any further. With a smirk on his face, Joseph felt that he hadn't offended anyone at all, because Richard looked like a real monster devouring the darkness. The heroine was deeply surprised and displeased when, to all this, he added the words that this was the reason for his marriage to such a little girl like her. The enraged Eliana could not understand how he dared to say such a thing, because he himself was the man who killed his nephew for the position of head of the fortress. Hearing that he himself was the only monster, Joseph looked angrily, and with great force in his hands, he threw the heroine to the floor. He could not understand what kind of nonsense his niece was babbling, because her brother had taken his own life precisely because he was afraid to take on such responsibility. He proudly stated that as an uncle who loved his nephews, he was simply obliged to sacrifice himself by fulfilling the duties he had refused. Not knowing what to do next, the heroine only said that the wind would never forgive him for everything he had done. After these words, Joseph, as if breaking free from a chain, grabbed Eliana by the throat and began to strangle her. Looking at his choking niece with a mad smile, he began to threaten her that he could kill her right now. But because of his feelings of affection, the man still wanted to tell her what had happened to her beloved brother, and to do this, he removed his hand from the girl's throat. The words that the hungry monsters liked everything and devoured his body without leaving a single piece left the heroine in shock. Trying not to believe these words, she shouted loudly that it was all a lie. She continued to deny the words that a memorial service could not be held for her brother because he had committed suicide. Having explained that he had no other choice, since it was impossible to bury and leave the decomposing body, he continued to smile sarcastically. After the girl asked him when he had thought of this, he pretended to think about it. When she heard the answer that it was after the moment Robert became a contender for the title, or perhaps from the day of her parents' deaths, she was stunned. With a smirk on his face, the man gave the final answer that all this was before they were born, when he first replaced his brother as the head and tried to undermine his power. While his brother had a name and power fit for an heir, and at the same time a beloved wife and children, Joseph received nothing. Having started to strangle the heroine again, he told her that he had received nothing from the family's strength. Pressing even harder on Eliana's throat, he screamed that he could only get one thing, but through great effort, this beautiful wind would not do anything to him, since he would be the only one who would bear the name of this family. Already beginning to lose consciousness, the heroine thought about whether Richard would be upset if he found out what had happened to her. Realizing that what had happened was not his fault at all, she thought that he should be thanked for everything he had done. Having barely managed to apologize to Richard, Eliana was on the verge of losing consciousness. Suddenly, a voice called out to Joseph as he was strangling him. Removing his hands, he and the barely breathing heroine looked into the doorway. The priestess standing there asked Joseph if he really wanted to put the saint who was helping him in an unpleasant situation. Seeing the priestess, Eliana realized that it was the girl who had brought her into the room in the morning, and she finally lost consciousness. Standing up, Joseph looked at the priestess in surprise and asked what she was even talking about. Although she didn't care whether Eliana died, she believed that killing in the land of wisdom was an inappropriate act. Having looked at the heroine, the dissatisfied man decided to do it somewhere else. When the knight burst into the room to announce that Elder Alfred would soon arrive, Joseph didn't even listen to him. He ordered the boy to take Eliana outside the temple as quickly as possible, and only looked at him with a menacing gaze when he asked him again. Waking up and opening her eyes slightly, Eliana recognized a familiar voice. Eliana remembered well how once, when she and her brother were little, they both saluted this soldier, despite all his refusals. Then Robert explained to him that he was saluting the brave knight of his family's castle. Thinking that the children had already done something, Elder Alfred called out to them. Seeing him, he and his brother were very happy. Having asked them not to quarrel, Richard, hugging his sister, said that they had not done anything yet. Turning to the knight, Alfred asked him to look after the children, because without supervision they could do who knows what. Putting his hand to his head, the elder expressed his hope for him. The knight did the same in response and with a smile full of happiness said that he would guard them with all responsibility. Turning around, he saw Eliana and Richard were very happy that he would be playing with them today. The knight, embarrassed, clarified that he had been ordered to protect them, not to play with them. Wondering what the word guard meant, Eliana heard an explanation from her brother, who said that it meant the same thing as protect. Their conversation turned to the sneezing knight, and looking at him, they noticed that he had become cold. Having asked the knight to give her his hands, Eliana at first puzzled him about it. When she placed the pouch in his palms, he was very surprised, and Robert explained to him that Adam's magic had been cast on him. With a beaming smile, Eliana said that she had just protected his hands, and now he wasn't cold. Agreeing with this, a smile appeared on his face. Trying to run away from the temple as quickly as possible, the knight did not notice anything on his way. He tripped and fell to the ground with a loud cry, dropping the bag containing Eliana. The knight raised him up in fear and said that they had not yet left the land of wisdom. The heroine, who was sitting there, began to listen to the knight's words about how he too had no choice, because if he disobeyed the leader's order, he would be killed. Trying to express all his regret, the soldier hoped that she would be able to understand him. An unexpected cry that he was an ungrateful traitor stopped the knight. Hearing a familiar voice, the heroine realized that it was an elder. Alfred stood before them, out of breath, furious at the betrayal of this common soldier. He believed that after this act, the boy would no longer dare to call himself a knight of this family's castle. Trembling with fear, he could not understand how the elder was able to get to this place so quickly. Pointing to the bag, Alfred asked if the guy was going to put it down on the ground, to which he screamed and began to back away. The elder grabbed the bag tightly and ordered it to be given to him as quickly as possible. He carefully placed the bag on the floor and asked Eliana if she was okay. Having untied the bag, the elder freed the girl and removed the remaining ropes from her. Thanking the wind, he hugged the heroine tightly. Continuing to calm Eliana, he again shouted at the knight for being ungrateful and treating his mistress this way, despite all her great kindness. Not knowing what to do next, the frightened soldier backed away. Alfred was very glad that everything was okay, and told Eliana that as long as she was with them, the wind would never forget the way to this place. Beginning to get up little by little, the heroine told about how she would soon become part of Richard's family, and that this would cause the disappearance of the wind's power. Having listed all the rumors that had been going around during this time, Albert said that although no one could see the wind, he knew everything, so he himself was not going to believe any nonsense. These words made Eliana feel much warmer in her soul, and a smile appeared on her face. Looking at them with horror, the soldier understood that if he left everything as it was, he would definitely be killed. With a trembling hand, he touched the hilt of the sword, and another plan appeared in his head. Eliana listened attentively to the elder's explanation of why Joseph could not possibly go against her engagement. He advised the girl to hide in a safe place until the wind had completely settled within her, but she did not understand what would happen to her family's castle then. In response to her question, Alfred said that he would wait until she became a worthy successor and returned to the fortress. All the elder's words about devotion brought tears to Eliana's eyes. Gently taking the heroine by the wrists, he, being the man who occupied the place of her grandfather, congratulated her on her engagement. With tears in her eyes, Eliana said that she would definitely return and take her family's surname. Believing her words, he continued to hold her hand. As they began to rise from the floor, they saw that knight running towards them. Intending to kill Eliana, he ran towards her with a scream and a sword in his hands. With horror in her eyes, she watched as, at the last moment, Elder Alfred covered her with his body and took the blow himself. Realizing that everything had not gone according to his plan, the knight looked at the wounded Alfred. The terrified heroine watched as the elder stood up and began to angrily scold the knight for not only failing his mission, but also killing Elder Alfred, who stood in his way. After the elder told him to disappear if he understood everything, the knight ran away screaming. Eliana caught the fallen Alfred and saw how quickly the blood was flowing from his wound. She started screaming and calling for help, but her attempts were in vain. Having asked to wait a little while she brought the magician, Eliana heard the elder's refusal because he knew his body better than anyone else. Wiping the tears from Eliana's face, he told her that she was the sacred child of her family, beloved by the wind, and asked her to never forget it. Eliana watched with tears in her eyes as his hand fell to the ground after saying his last words. She still remembered how happily she always ran to Elder Alfred with her brother. The heroine sat in tears next to the elder's cooling body and begged him not to leave her. Still not believing what had happened, Eliana watched as the priests covered his body. All the priests ignored her question about where they were taking his body. The priests held Eliana down as she begged them to tell her what they were going to do with his body. Thinking about how she had been told to wash the blood off her mortal body as quickly as possible, Eliana took a bath. The priestess who opened the door decided to look at the girl. Clenching her hand into a fist, she blamed herself and begged the elder to forgive her. She blamed herself for the fact that she could have protected the elder and her brother if only she had the strength. Remembering Alfred's words about her need to become part of Richard's family, Eliana threw all thoughts out of her head and set a goal for herself, to gain power, no matter what. Coming out of the bathroom, Eliana noticed that they had brought new clothes that were not at all different from yesterday's. The priestess standing behind her noted with displeasure that the girl's bathing had taken too long and that preparations needed to begin as quickly as possible. When Eliana started talking about the fortress, the priestess immediately interrupted her, saying that she could not answer such useless questions. Reminding her that this was the land of wisdom, she said that the girl's task was to quickly put on her clothes and go to where the king and high priest were waiting. Despite all this, Eliana firmly insisted that they immediately bring her the dress that was brought from her family's fortress. The priestess did not understand at all what the girl's intentions were when she said such a thing, but the heroine who interrupted her convinced her otherwise. Eliana interrupted all the priestess's complaints, saying that she was simply trying to fully comply with the rule that anyone going to a meeting with the king and the high priest must wear the best clothes he has. Having said that she would check whether the dress the girl was talking about existed, the priestess left the room. Eliana understood how responsible Elder Alfred was, so she was convinced that he had brought her the outfit. Still a child of her family, she had to make a good showing, so it would be a good idea to wear this particular outfit. While waiting for Eliana at the meeting place, Richard thought that she was a little late, and there was a possibility that something had happened. At that moment, Eliana arrived, dressed in the most beautiful long dress, which was complemented by a translucent veil adorning her hair. Looking at the girl, he realized that this dress represented the strength of her family, and he wondered how she could wear it. The thought that something had definitely happened that night was dispelled when Eliana called out to him. She extended her hand and invited Richard to go and ask for it together. Looking at the heroine, he agreed and took Eliana by the hand. With a request to enter the Supreme Temple, the priests opened the doors. While bowing before the king and the high priest, Eliana and Richard heard a request to rise and look at them in order to understand whether there was a lie hidden in their confession. Turning to Richard and saying that he had made an uncharacteristic noise, the king asked whether it would not be better to wait a little longer, since Eliana was only 14 years old. In response to this question, Richard explained that his entire family was not prone to putting off decisions until later, and his patience had already melted, being absorbed into the land of wisdom. The king knew very well that Richard was characterized by cold-blooded behavior and was only surprised at how important this girl was to him then. Thinking that he had already lost both his parents and his best friend, Richard understood that even back then, when he saw Eliana in the closet, he had already decided everything for himself. Saying that Eliana was the only dear creature he had left, he asked the king and the high priest to permit their undefiled marriage. The king was very surprised by Richard's uncharacteristic behavior and only looked at him in amazement. Before he could say a word, he looked at the high priest, who was outraged by the request for permission for this undefiled marriage. He angrily asked Richard if he had heard his request correctly. The priest grinned, not quite believing that Richard had reached the land of wisdom so quickly just for the sake of marrying a young girl. Turning to Eliana, he waited to hear what the girl would tell him, since she also had a say in all of this. The heroine quipped that if she hadn't had this right, she wouldn't have dared to ask everyone to gather. The high priest asked how she could even know about feelings for Richard at 14 years old. He was sure that she would one day deeply regret this wrong decision at such a young age. Having said that she could find someone better, the priest asked again with displeasure whether Richard was right for her. Not knowing the answer to this question, she only said that he is the only thing she has. Clenching her palms, the heroine was absolutely certain that there would never be anyone who could compare to Richard. In a crumbling world she had previously trusted, only Richard offered her a helping hand. The heroine said with pride in her words that Richard was perfect for her. The even more enraged high priest believed that all these words addressed to Richard were blasphemous and could only be used towards God. Hearing how the priest shouted at them that the filthy strangers dared to speak such sacred words, they looked at him in confusion. Suddenly, without letting him finish, the king stood up and began to joyfully say that this was completely normal, because loving your spouse as God intended was an integral part of the Holy Scriptures. Looking up at the king, who had fully sensed all their feelings and determination, Eliana and Richard looked in his direction with relief. The high priest was taken aback by the king's words that he had no reason to be against their marriage, and because of this, he had to give his consent as well. With the wisdom given by God, the king gave permission for the marriage between Eliana and Richard. Asking them to stand up, he said that Richard and Eliana should strengthen their devotion to each other with the breath of God. As the marriage prayer process began, the king carefully handed over the holy book. While reading the prayer, the high priest told Eliana and Richard to confess together. Eliana felt the wind wrap around her fingers in a familiar way. She remembered very well how, when Robert hugged her, a soft wind enveloped them both. Looking at Richard, the heroine had a wild desire to share this wind with him. Looking at Eliana, he carefully took her outstretched hand. A beautiful smile flashed across her face, seeming to illuminate everything around it. Suddenly looking tenderly into his friend's eyes, Richard said that he was giving his all to Eliana. He was ready to accept all her decisions and act in accordance with her wishes. When they were given the privilege of being a part of each other's lives, the priest asked to see the symbols of their devotion. Not understanding what symbols were being discussed, the heroine had no idea what to do. Seeing how worried the girl was, he began to rummage in his bosom, telling her that there was no need to worry. In his hands was a box, inside of which were 2 beautiful rings with a crescent moon. After his request, Eliana carefully placed the black ring on his ring finger. Richard, asking the heroine to come over, fastened the chain on which the ring hung around her neck and said that she could not put it on yet. The heroine looked at Richard with embarrassment and surprise. At that moment, he also looked at the heroine with a radiant, albeit not bright, smile on his face. Calling out loudly to Richard and Eliana, Bella moved closer and closer to them. The out-of-breath girl first asked how everything went. With a smile on her face, Eliana showed her the chain with the ring, thus making it clear that everything had gone well. Having already anticipated this outcome of events, Bella happily rushed to hug them both. In response, Eliana, with a sincere smile on her face, also hugged the girl tightly. Looking around after the magician transferred them from the land of wisdom, Richard was surprised. He didn't understand why they ended up at the entrance to the fortress and not in his room. With a bright smile on her face, Bella told him about her duty to Robert, who asked her to stop him from taking the heroine before she turned 18. Without saying much about it, the guy was about to leave, but the girl stopped him. Realizing that he didn't even want to ask a single question, she gave him a hint that he should remember her words that she spoke before they left for the land of wisdom. All he could think about was how she spoke about the discontent of the elders and their daughters. Bella refused his request for another clue and said that if he didn't understand, he would be stuck here forever. Turning around, he wanted to ask Eliana if she had any guesses. Turning around, he looked around and could not understand where the girl had disappeared to. Hearing someone's voice saying that he was a stupid groom who didn't even know where his bride had gone, he raised his head. Looking up, he saw a bewildered Eliana with William and Charles standing next to her. One of them noted that the groom seemed to be in trouble, and the other asked the girl if she thought this was true. Not understanding what kind of fuss these brothers were making, he loudly asked them about it. Appearing out of nowhere, Olivia, one of the elders' daughters, explained to him that they were simply following his family's old traditions and celebrating the chief's wedding with a banquet. After explaining that he must find his kidnapped bride before dawn, she said that if he did not manage to do so, the marriage for which he had worked so hard would be in vain. Olivia gently placed her palms on Eliana's shoulders and asked the brothers to take care of everything else, to which they agreed with a smile. Suddenly, Eliana heard Richard call her name. After asking her to wait a little, he said that he would find her quickly. With a smile on her face, she nodded her head at him in agreement. As he ran quickly, he saw two brothers who were mimicking his words, blocking his path. In response to their words that they could suffer from such tenderness, Richard said that he would be the only one to suffer. They relayed Olivia's words that a small scar is normal, and Bella's, who generally said that everything will be fine as long as he is alive. With their swords held out in front of them, William and Charles asked to accept their sincere congratulations on the occasion of the wedding. Looking around, Eliana saw a crowd of people crowding the busy streets. When Olivia asked if she was worried, the girl, without any hesitation, gave a negative answer. Knowing that it was a day that brought joy to everyone in this fortress, she thought that it would not be a big difficulty for the chief. As Eliana hugged the girl tightly, it was clear to her how kind a child she was. Having asked to remove such a polite form of address, Eliana said that Olivia could safely call her by her first name. When Olivia asked her to do the same, Eliana tenderly said her name, calling her sister at the same time. The girl could not resist such sweet behavior and said that Eliana was incredibly dangerous for her heart. Loud screams made the girls turn towards where Richard was fighting with his two brothers. Jumping up, William and Charles both started attacking the guy. Despite all the brothers' tricks, Richard managed to dodge their swords. Having deceived them, he made it so that the two guys collided. Olivia looked at Charles and William fighting casually and did not understand at all what they were doing. One of the brothers, seeing Olivia, began to wave his hand at her, and despite all her cries for him to be attentive and look ahead, he still did not have time to react. Noticing that the guy was distracted, Richard kicked the sword out of his hands, and the weapon fell to the floor with a loud clang. Seeing how Charles had screwed up, Olivia told him to pull himself together. Accusing her of still not being able to distinguish between him and his brother, Charles pretended to be William. Not understanding what his brother was talking about, William started shouting that the girl should under no circumstances fall for this. An enraged Olivia continued to watch with trembling eyes as Charles and William continued to figure out who was who. Realizing that the brothers were very busy arguing, Richard carefully ran past them. Olivia knew she had made a huge mistake when she put these clowns on the first line of defense. To Eliana's surprise, the girl explained that there were other such lines awaiting Richard, and that they all needed to be sure that the groom received his bride as late as possible. When she said that Eliana would also have to do something, the heroine wondered if this was also a tradition of this fortress. With a grin on her face, Olivia said that this was a very important tradition. Having defeated all the soldiers blocking his path, Richard became closer and closer to his goal. The child's cry that they had seen the head made him flinch. He saw a bunch of children having fun with wooden swords trying to block his way. In bewilderment, he simply walked past the still joyful children, who at least somehow tried to block his path, waving their swords and small fists. After Richard passed them, he saw all three elders sitting at the table. One of them, slamming a wooden mug of wine on the table, expressed his dissatisfaction with the fact that Richard had arrived very late, and he had almost handed over his place as elder to his daughter. Turning to the two soldiers standing behind him, Richard asked how long ago the elders had opened the alcohol warehouse and received the answer that this most likely happened yesterday morning. Richard knew very well that when some joyful events took place in the fortress, the elders would not move from their place until they drank all the alcohol that was brought to them. Looking at the remaining barrels, he realized that this would take another couple of hours and could continue until late. Having told the boy to sit down with them quickly, the elders, with grinning faces, decided to show him their secret power, which had been passed down from generation to generation. With a sigh, Richard approached them, ready for anything. Opening the door and entering the room, Eliana was delighted to see Bella sitting there. She explained to the heroine that, being the mage of this fortress, it was not at all difficult for her to get here in a second. When Eliana asked where everyone else was, Bella suggested that they were probably having fun and causing chaos right now because they were very happy that the head of the fortress was getting married. Having told the heroine to sit down, Olivia announced that she would now bring her something to eat. Eliana looked down and thought that everyone was very kind to her, and that was why she sometimes had the impression that she was getting more than she deserved. Eliana thanked the girl for the warmed milk, while Bella offered Olivia a drink. The heroine looked at them with bewilderment when they said that it was good to drink during their conversations. They explained that, following the traditions of the fortress, while the groom is trying to get his bride back, she must tell her friends how she fell in love with him. Eager for an answer, they began asking Eliana about what made her fall in love with the leader. The heroine looked at Bella and Olivia in surprise and didn't even know what to answer them. Having convinced the girl not to worry, they told her that trust was as important to them as their own lives. With a joyful smile, both girls promised to keep her confession forever. Realizing that the girls had taken her and Richard for a real couple, she realized that the elders and the others had done the same. After thinking for a moment, Olivia realized that it was rather cruel to force Eliana to reveal the good side of the chapter. Agreeing, Bella said that although he is her friend and does not want to talk about it, she knows how boring he is. Asking what kind of person he was, she remembered how when she first saw Richard, it seemed to her that he was not a person at all. Eliana admitted that when she first saw Richard, his facial expression did not change at all, and at the same time, because he was tall, it seemed to her that he was simply wearing a human mask. Hearing the heroine compare him to a sculpture, Bella could only agree, but along with her comparison, Eliana added that this sculpture was made from everything magnificent in the world. Suddenly realizing all the words, Bella and Olivia screamed loudly in surprise. Eliana agreed with their words that she immediately liked Richard's appearance. Even before this, Eliana only knew about his beautiful appearance and that's all, even if Robert sometimes called him stern. But now the heroine managed to understand him from a completely different side. Assuming that she knew why her brother liked the leader, she told him with a bright smile that Richard was a very kind person, and there was no one who would not like this kindness. Thinking that the elders should drink less, Richard left them to sleep at the table. Thinking he was very lucky that there was no alcohol in the other rooms, he went to fetch his wife. Noticing that Eliana was tired, Olivia suggested that she close her eyes for a bit, since she must be tired after her trip to the land of wisdom. Leaning the girl onto her shoulder, Olivia didn't even look at the fact that Richard was about to arrive. With a bright smile on her face, she said that she would always remember Eliana today, and if she came to her tired, whenever that was, she would tell her everything about today. Olivia really didn't want the girl to have any reason to return, and she deeply hoped that when Eliana grew up, she would fall deeply in love and be happy. Entering the girl's room, Richard was very surprised by what he saw. A tired Eliana slept soundly on Olivia's shoulder, her head resting against hers. Having sat down at the bench, he nevertheless decided not to wake her and was already ready to go back. Hearing Eliana's voice, he turned towards the girl. Rubbing her eyes, she told him that she had fallen asleep while she was waiting for him. Eliana stood up and held the sleeping Olivia, thus preventing her from falling. She told Richard that the girls had drunk too much and that it would be difficult to wake them up in that state. Worried about the heroine, the guy asked if she should sleep a little longer. Since Alina knew that if she didn't go with him, their marriage would be ruined, she refused this offer. Even though Richard told her that no one but themselves could break the marriage, since they had already made a vow before God, Eliana did not want him to become the laughingstock of the village. Worried about being called that since he had lost his fiancée immediately, Eliana heard Richard reply that he could simply be in denial. With a bright smile, she said that as his wife, she could not allow this to happen. Richard was very surprised by these words and looked at the girl with an astonished look. Having said that they should return to the room, the heroine went forward, but stumbled and quickly began to fall down. Reacting quickly, Richard managed to catch the falling Eliana. The frightened heroine thanked the guy and noted that she should have been more careful. She was surprised by how abruptly Richard turned around and said that he would walk her to her room. Leaving the room, Eliana followed Richard, who was walking ahead. Hearing the heroine sneeze, Richard stopped and turned around. He approached Eliana and, throwing his frock coat over her shoulders, asked the girl to put it on, because it was quite cool in the evenings. Having thanked him for this, the heroine noticed that the atmosphere had become somewhat awkward. Continuing to walk further, she decided to ask what everyone thought about their relationship. Without hearing a word from the guy, Eliana clarified that she thought they knew the truth, but it seemed there had been a misunderstanding. Having said that he had already told the elders and their close associates that they were engaged, he explained that he, as the head of the fortress, must put only the interests of the fortress first. Since nothing good would come of it if everyone found out that he had interfered in the affairs of another fortress because of a friend, he believed that this would be the best option, and although everyone doubted it, they did not say anything against it. When he complained that this made her feel awkward, Eliana began to deny it. She said that Bella and Olivia started asking her about the reason why she fell in love with him. Although she thought for a long time about how to answer them, the heroine confidently told them how wonderful and caring he was. Thinking that he shouldn't have said that, the confused heroine heard Richard say that she shouldn't have said that. Noticing his flushed face, Eliana realized that Richard was embarrassed by her words. Suddenly, Charles and William appeared before them, and seeing that Richard had found his bride, they were saddened that they would no longer be able to make fun of him. When they asked if they were returning from where Olivia was, Richard answered in the affirmative. The brothers were absolutely sure that Olivia had definitely fallen asleep somewhere in an inconvenient place because she was drunk, and they decided to go after her. Since they had already done all the work, they concluded to simply let Richard and Eliana go. Wishing them a good rest, the brothers sincerely congratulated them on their wedding and left. Admiring the brightly shining ring in the moonlight, Eliana felt as if there was a star on it. These words immediately reminded Richard that his mother had said exactly the same thing. At the same time, he explained to Eliana that this ring had been passed down from generation to generation in his family. The heroine felt that this ring was too valuable to be in her possession, but the guy reassured her that even if this was true, it would be difficult to return the ring. He explained that if she returned the ring, it would mean the end of their marriage, and she would leave the fortress. At the same time, leaning towards the girl, he added in a whisper that it would still happen someday. Eliana was surprised by how Richard said with a smile on his face that, nevertheless, it would not happen today. Although he never said it, the heroine was the only one for him, and therefore there was no one better suited for this ring. Looking at the ring, the embarrassed heroine simply accepted it as a fact. The girl understood that she was the only one her brother left after his death. But as soon as everything falls into place and peace returns, she will leave this fortress. Clutching the ring to her chest, she promised to keep it with all her heart. The heroine was confident that she would one day bring him back with a smile on her face. With a smile on his face, Richard said that when this happens, he will gladly accept this ring. He was very glad that Eliana had really had fun today, and was even more convinced that all the people in this fortress were very cheerful and kind. Having thanked him, the heroine returned his frock coat to him and headed towards her room. Opening the door, she stopped and looked towards Richard. He looked at Eliana in surprise, ready to listen carefully to what she was about to say. With a bright smile on her face that seemed to illuminate everything around her, she said goodbye until the next day. Early one sunny morning, Eliana went to the window and began to tell her late brother that a week had already passed since she married Richard. With a bright smile, she mentally informed him that everything was fine with her and that she had almost gotten used to living here. Now she can do her own hair and has even learned to tie bows perfectly. After asking not to worry too much about her, Eliana left her room. Opening the doors, Eliana's joyful expression turned to bewilderment when she saw a piece of raw meat in front of her. She didn't understand how something like that could be lying in front of the door to her room. Richard was busy preparing the dishes while preparing for breakfast. At that moment, Eliana arrived and, having wished good morning, heard a mutual greeting. Richard agreed with the help of Eliana, who offered to take the plate he had in his hands. The heroine suggested that Bella would have breakfast later and heard Richard's agreement because he knew that this girl never woke up on time. Richard confirmed the heroine's words that they would stay overnight in the temple and said that he had already warned Bella about the need to leave early. The guy suggested moving on to food, to which Eliana, sitting down at the table, agreed. Looking at the plate of meat stew, the heroine immediately remembered the raw meat in front of her door. Noticing the way the girl was looking at the food, Richard assumed that she had no appetite. Eliana continued to look at the plate in bewilderment and did not agree with his guess. When she suggested that he cleaned the fortress himself, since there were no servants there, Richard agreed and explained that he cleaned all the rooms and offices himself. After her question about who cleaned the hallways then, Richard was so shocked that he stopped. After apologizing, he said that he needed to clarify some things about that day and that Eliana shouldn't worry about it. The heroine just looked at him in surprise and didn't say a word. After Richard asked her what she had planned for the day, the girl said that she was going to clean her room, take a walk, and feed all the animals in the fortress. Richard reminded her to remember to read at least one book, to which she exclaimed in surprise. Explaining that she was at an age where she needed to learn, Richard said that after Eliana had rested, he would hire her a good teacher who would teach her the basics. Seeing her saddened face, the guy said that such an expression would not help avoid this, because she needed to know at least the basics. Eliana looked at Richard in surprise, for whom this was a great relief, because all children tend to hate studying. Getting up from the table, Richard said that he would go and wake Bella, asking if Elian would mind if he left first. While not at all against this, Eliana understood that she was being treated like a child again, and although she and Richard had taken vows as a married couple, he was behaving like a strict teacher. The heroine was very interested in what kind of relationship there was between her and the boss. While feeding the dogs, Eliana was suddenly called out by someone's voice. Turning around, she saw Charles and William standing behind her, noting that she had arrived first. Seeing the bucket, one of the brothers said that she had prepared a real feast for these guys, and Eliana, agreeing, told them that this was her last stop. The dog's barking made Eliana distracted from her conversation with her brothers, who said that they had also come here to clean up. She was sure that the dog was not hungry and only stroked him tenderly. One of the guys standing behind said that their mistress, it seemed, would not be able to join the nightly order. She was very surprised that the reason for this was that in order to join the club, you had to have at least one scar from a bite from these dogs. The brothers told her that if you tease these dogs, they will start chasing and can bite very hard even through a thick layer of skin. Alina was confused because the brothers looked after them so well. Saying they had no other choice, Charles explained that there was no animal better at finding monsters than these dogs. After this, Eliana immediately remembered those very words of her uncle about monsters. In her mind, she could clearly see the moment when a grinning Joseph said that there was nothing left of Robert's corpse because the monsters had eaten everything, leaving not a single piece. Terrible memories interrupted her brother's questions about whether everything was okay with her. Saying that it was time for her to go, Eliana quickly ran away, not even noticing that she had left the bucket. Not understanding what had happened, Charles and William watched the girl run away. That night, Eliana couldn't sleep and assumed that the reason for this was her memories of her uncle's words. Thoughts were spinning in her head about whether her uncle was telling the truth and whether her brother really had been eaten by monsters. Hearing a loud sound, Eliana jumped out of bed in fright and did not understand what it was, because except for the head, who was not there at the moment, no one should have gone in that direction. Opening the door, she saw a piece of raw meat, just like it was in the morning. When the heroine turned around, she could only see the creature's back and tail, on which large, sharp growths were visible. Not knowing what to do, Eliana continued to look at the end of the corridor in horror. Plucking up her courage, she decided to see what it was and, continuing to reassure herself, headed in that direction. With the thought that this fortress must definitely be safe, Eliana reached the end of the corridor and turned around. What she saw made the heroine stop in fear. Before her stood a creature, almost twice her height, with a multitude of sharp fangs in its slavering mouth. After it slowly began to approach the heroine, she backed away. Remembering that she had definitely seen it somewhere in a book, she realized that there was definitely a monster standing in front of her. She turned around sharply and ran very quickly, without even looking back. Running out onto the street, Eliana, breathing heavily, quickly ran across the bridge between two buildings, sparing no effort. Charles and William walked ahead, talking carefree and happily discussing something with each other. Suddenly, one of the brothers drew his brother's attention to a small silhouette running towards them. The heroine bumped into one of the brothers, and they began to ask the lady what she was doing there so early and what had happened to her. With frightened eyes pleading for help, Eliana looked at the boys and said in a trembling voice that she saw a monster in the fortress. The young men looked at the girl in surprise, amazed by the words she said. The brothers looked at each other, wondering whether the appearance of a monster in the fortress was impossible or not. Already in the morning, the three of them came to Olivia. The girl sat down on the sofa, and two guys stood next to the daughter of one of the elders. The heroine confirmed the words of the girl, who asked again whether she had seen the monster in the fortress, and Olivia realized that it seemed she had seen that child. Eliana didn't understand what child they were talking about, and just looked at the girl in surprise. Standing up from her chair, Olivia explained that even though she said he was a child, he was still a monster, a species called a griffclaw. Walking up to the shelf and running her eyes over it, she pulled out the book she needed, which told about the monsters that lived in the north. With a bright smile on her face, the girl announced that although the heroine's classes were supposed to start in a couple of days, they would start a little earlier. Then Eliana realized that by a good teacher Richard meant Olivia, who was very surprised by his words. The book said that the griffclaw is a monster that represents the north and can be easily found in the northern mountains. They usually live in packs due to their need for socialization and are also nocturnal. Many people say that the sight of a flock of griffin vultures flying with large, outstretched wings is particularly beautiful and amazing. After the description, Eliana clarified that the monster she saw did not have wings, to which Olivia told her that it already lacked wings when the leader brought it to the fortress. The elder's daughter herself knew nothing about what happened to him, but since he now lives in the fortress, he became a friend to them. She found it very interesting that the monster left a piece of meat in front of Eliana's door every night. One of the brothers suggested that the griffclaw wanted to befriend the lady, and the other, agreeing, added that he was simply sharing his food. Seeing the meaning in these words, Olivia could now assume that the monster had a positive attitude towards Eliana. Both brothers believed that the leader should know more about this monster than anyone else, since he understands its speech, but Olivia said that he is not in the fortress now. The elder's daughter was surprised by Eliana's request to lend her a book. She explained that she didn't want to just sit and wait for the leader to return, since she was now also officially part of this fortress. With all seriousness in her words, Eliana said that she would find out everything about the Griffclaves on her own. Olivia and Charles and William standing behind her were very surprised by such a statement on her part. The brothers, noting that this was worthy of praise, with embarrassed faces, carefully stroked the heroine's head. Seeing how much they enjoyed touching the girl's soft hair, Olivia got up abruptly from her chair, furious. Pointing at the boys, she said with displeasure that this could well be considered rudeness towards the owner of the fortress. Pressing her hands to her chest, Olivia spoke of her desire to come to the fortress every day and stroke Eliana's soft hair in the same way, since she had previously held back. Charles and William knew that Olivia had always been weak to favor and thought the same of them, but the girl's words that she had not yet thought about how nasty they would grow up shocked them. William asked his brother if he had heard Olivia say they were nasty, and Charles, with tears in his eyes, said that those words had struck him in the heart. After the girl said that she didn't mean it that way, Eliana couldn't help but smile at her friend's sweet behavior. On a bright sunny day, Richard was walking around the temple. Suddenly a voice called out to him, and raising his head he saw two priests standing in front of him. After the greeting, one of the priests decided to ask if it was true that he had gotten married. They reported that in the temple they were talking only about this news, and about their very romantic relationship. At the same time, the priests noted that although the king had no feelings, this was now more noticeable than ever before, and even after marriage he could not do anything about it, so apparently he was still hasty. A look of confusion crossed Richard's face, and looking away, he made it clear that he had not been in the least bit hasty. Seeing the boy's reaction, the priests began to tease him about it, saying that they never thought they would see him so embarrassed and remember this moment for the rest of their lives. Richard looked on in bewilderment as the two men continued to laugh at him. When they asked if he had really changed his schedule, Richard agreed and explained that he had done so in order to return home today, as he was worried about leaving Eliana alone. He was very worried because he didn't know what might happen to her during this time. Reassuring himself that it was unlikely that anything would happen since they were active at different times, the possibility that Eliana might encounter this monster in the corridor arose in his mind. He deeply regretted not having explained everything to her, even if it was difficult for him to accept the whole truth. Looking around, Richard noticed a familiar silhouette standing nearby. Joseph turned around and noticed Richard approaching him. With a stern expression, he ignored his mark. Without hearing an answer, Joseph just laughed at the fact that he, as usual, was very silent. Clarifying that even if it was quite late, with a grinning expression on his face he congratulated Richard on his marriage. After these words, only anger and fury were visible on Richard's face, but not gratitude. With a glare, Richard emphasized that congratulations, especially from him, were unnecessary. Joseph came a little closer and, laughing, asked in surprise why he was saying such a thing. Smiling, he expressed surprise because for him Richard had become like a son-in-law. Richard, with his hand extended to his belt, realized that the sword he had intended to take out was missing. The boy glared at Joseph when he mentioned that weapons were strictly prohibited in the land of wisdom. At the same time, the grinning man expressed all his regret that he did not have a weapon, since this would have allowed the guy to do whatever he wanted. Putting on an even more evil smile, he suddenly remembered his beloved Eliana and began asking if everything was okay with her. With his fists shaking with anger, Richard continued to listen to his nonsense about how it still shocked him that a person who acted like a child had become the mistress of the fortress. Joseph continued to say that he was worried about whether his niece was treating him well and whether she would tarnish his family name, but Richard could not listen to it anymore. Interrupting him, the guy said that he didn't like it when strangers talked so freely about his wife. To these words, Joseph accused him of stealing a small child in order to take her as a wife, believing that this was done instinctively. The last drop of patience snapped, and Richard, grabbing the man by the collar, lifted him up. With a crazy face, Joseph began asking him if he was satisfied with his niece and what he wanted to do, calling him the head of the monsters. Richard's anger knew no bounds, and he was already on the verge of killing him. The knights with swords standing behind them would not have allowed Richard to do more than just grab him by the collar. Richard's hand suddenly released the man's collar, who then grabbed his throat. After warning him that he should be careful not to offend this monster again, Richard turned and walked away. Watching him go, Joseph said that it would not be for long, because the day would soon come when he would be recognized as the official head. The bright sunny day gave way to a pink sunset, and the heroine, sitting on a bench surrounded by dogs, was reading a book. She was very surprised when she learned that the Grifflaws do not expel the weak from the pack, but, on the contrary, distribute food and live together, because this was evidence that the monster brought meat to her door. Seeing how hard she was studying, Charles and William, who were passing by, said that with such diligence she could become a professor of monster studies and asked if she had learned anything interesting. With a confused expression on her face, Eliana shared her assumption that the cub perceived her as the weak link of the pack. Confirming his guess, the brothers said the reason he considered her weak was that their mistress was very small and cute. In honor of this, they suggested somehow thanking this cub, and Eliana found something in the book that he would like. Having learned that the Griffclaws liked dried fruits, the heroine asked the knights if they might happen to have any in the fortress. Even before his departure, Richard came to Griffclaw and, having apologized, said that he had come to say something, to which he looked at him questioningly. He explained to the cub that he had brought Eliana here the previous night, and added that they were active at different times, so they would not be able to meet. But because she became part of this fortress, the leader asked him to take care of her. Griffclaw happily agreed to his request, and he thanked him. On a moonlit night, Griffclaw woke up as usual after his daytime nap. Taking a bucket of raw meat with him, he imagined how he would share it with the weak lady. As soon as he thought that after she ate this meat, she would immediately become stronger, the cub became very happy. Taking a bucket and a broom with him, he left his room. Turning around, he looked in surprise at the person standing near his room. Eliana, standing there, was frightened and didn't even know what she should say. When the cub came a little closer, he made a sound again, as if asking what the girl wanted from him. Having loudly apologized, the heroine with a sharp movement extended a basket covered with cloth in front of her. Griffclaw carefully moved the fabric aside and took several pieces of dried fruit from the basket. After trying the treat, he liked it so much that he started dancing with joy. Eliana was very happy that he liked the dried fruits she brought so much. She was very surprised when the cub responded by giving her an iron bucket of raw meat. Holding out the bucket, the Griffclaw made a sound that implied that the girl should take the bucket from him. Having expressed her gratitude, Eliana refused such a gift, saying that she only eats boiled meat. The room was illuminated by a bright light, and Richard and Bella appeared in it. The girl asked him what their plan was now. In response to her question, Richard suggested that they make a schedule for the next day from the very beginning and as early as possible. Already in the morning, Richard apologized for calling Bella so early, to which she said that there was nothing wrong with it, since the situation was quite urgent. To begin with, she wanted to continue yesterday's conversation. According to Richard's guess, when the betrothal ceremony took place, Joseph was in the lands of wisdom, and at the same time he felt the magic of the wind in the territory. Bella noted that the temple could not have been unaware of how low-level mages, who were not even responsible for the titles, were using magic indiscriminately. She knew the priest had definitely approved of Joseph's presence, but since Eliana remained safe, the bastard's plan failed. Richard heard a question from a confused Bella about what had prompted the high priest to help him in the first place. The guy told her that in the fortress on the land of fire, as well as the birthplace of the priestess, he was aiming for the place of the next king of wisdom. Very surprised by this answer, she asked whether he meant the high priest's wife when he mentioned the priestess. Richard began to talk about how several years ago the previous head of this fortress suddenly died. Since he had no children, people assumed that one of his 3 nephews would take his place, and, as expected, the second nephew, who had succeeded in the power of fire, took the place of the chief. Sometime later, the youngest niece, Amanda, was chosen as a priestess, and the current high priest took her as his wife. However, there is very little information about the eldest of the 3 nephews, and there is also a possibility that he is secretly plotting something. At the same time, Richard noted that there are many questions regarding the death of the former head, and since they seized control of the temple, people are undoubtedly concerned. Bella expressed the opinion that there was a high probability that the high priest was helping the priestess and this fortress. The girl was stunned after realizing that these people also helped Joseph become the leader. Picking up on the girl's thought, Richard said that after he became the head, he would have the right to vote in the election of the king of the land of wisdom. Bella was very surprised by this fact, but Richard calmed her down a little, saying that Joseph's position was still temporary. The guy pointed out that if he wanted to be officially recognized as the leader, he would have to train his wind power. Along with this, Joseph still had to find the castle's mage, who had disappeared after Robert's death, and logically, this would be his most important mission. The words about the magician reminded Bella that she had just had a report on this. She was able to find Adam's location and, pointing to the place on the map, said that she felt his magic there yesterday. Looking at the map, Richard realized that this place was the city of Revi in the land of time. This city had more developed tourism than other fortresses, but at the same time it was the most criminal. Bella was sure that it was definitely his magic, even if it was weak, and she assumed that he had not used magic for a long time so as not to be noticed. She suggested that maybe he had been in a situation where he had to use magic, and Richard had told her that they should prepare. Bella was very surprised when he suggested leaving tomorrow. She told the guy, who was about to leave, that he was acting too quickly and that Eliana would probably get tired. Opening the door to the room, Eliana asked with a bright smile if they had decided when they were leaving. Richard didn't know what to say when Bella announced that she had called her. Approaching the guy, the heroine told him that the girl had already introduced her to the essence of the matter, and it seemed to her that she should definitely go with him to Rivi. Richard, with a menacing look, tried to convince the girl, because in the fortress on the land of time, there would be many dangerous places, and they did not even have the exact location of the magician. Interrupting him, Eliana said that it was her personal decision, and she had to find her family's mage. Richard was very surprised by her words that if danger arose, he would be by her side. With a bright smile on her face, Eliana asked to confirm her words. A drop of embarrassment appeared on the guy's face, and, after remaining silent at first, he finally agreed. Hearing a positive answer, Eliana beamed with happiness. Bella continued to watch as the heroine agreed to carry out all the instructions without hesitation. With a smile on their faces, the elders reported that they had prepared everything and compiled a map of the most famous places in Revi. Having handed the guy the schedule they recommended, they asked him not to look at it in front of his wife, but to remember it now. Looking at the paper, Richard said he was very sorry to disappoint them, but this was not a honeymoon. The chairman, in denial, angrily attacked the guy because they believed that if the newlyweds went on a trip together, then it was definitely a honeymoon. When Richard expressed his idea that they were more interested in this marriage than he was, the three elders agreed without hesitation. The boy always believed that the elders had no reason to be interested in this. The surprise on the face of one of the chairmen turned into a smile, and he explained that they had all been watching him since he was a little boy. Another chairman said that although Richard had overcome great pain, he still became a good man. Along with them, the third elder added that Richard had not lost the ability to appreciate things. Richard was very surprised by the words of the elders and the fact that he did not turn away from a friend who was in trouble, and they cannot help but respect such a character. Looking at them, Richard didn't quite want to hear that they already knew the reason why he got married. With a smile on his face, one of the chairmen explained to him that this was the choice of their leader, and no matter what his worldview was, they had no reason to disagree with him. Looking down and embarrassed by all these words, Richard thanked them. While one of the chairmen held him by the shoulders with a smile, he once again expressed his deep gratitude. The elder noted that the head had been very busy with work lately. Having asked him to leave his work for them for a while, they told him that he should go to the city with the lady and return only after they had rested a little. At this time, Bella, standing around the corner, was listening to their entire conversation. Once in the city itself, Eliana was very surprised because it was the first time she had seen such a big city. Richard was very surprised when the girl grabbed his hand and suggested that they go quickly. The surprise on her face turned into a smile, and he agreed with her. Holding hands, Eliana and Richard walked on. Before they left, Bella suggested that if they could persuade Adam within 3 days, they would return here with the help of his magic. But if they do not return within the appointed time, the girl will return them herself. Bella explained that she couldn't go into town with them because a powerful mage like Adam would definitely be able to spot her if she was anywhere nearby. Richard agreed with the girl's words that it would be quite problematic if he ran away to hide somewhere else, since they had already barely found him. He also pointed out that she should get a good rest during this long-awaited vacation, to which she said that she would not move from her bed at all. Stroking Eliana on the head, she wished her a good trip and reminded her that as long as she was with Richard, she would be safe. After saying that she was sending them on their way immediately, Bella began to use her power. At the same time, she reminded them to focus not only on work, but also to have fun as well. Eliana was very surprised when Richard said to come up with names first, and he told her that the leaders initially had to go through a legal process to get into another region. But since they came here quietly today, hiding the fact that Richard was the leader, they need to go in secret so that no problems arise between the fortresses. When the girl asked what she should call him, the guy said that she could call him whatever she felt comfortable with. After some thought, Eliana decided to call Richard cute, and he didn't even know what to say from surprise. People standing next to them, hearing this, began to guess whether they were a married couple, despite their age difference. The heroine was surprised when the guy asked her to come up with another nickname because they were married. Eliana remembered very well how in the fortress, her family's wives called her exactly that way. Richard placed his hand on his chest and asked her to simply call him by his first name, and he would call her by that name too. Eliana couldn't understand how she could call the head by name, and whether it would be normal on her part. The guy reassured her that everything would be fine, because they had already done this in the fortress. Embarrassed, the girl nevertheless agreed to Richard's proposal. The guy was very surprised when he felt Eliana reach out to his palm. Taking him by the hand, the heroine suggested that he look around, calling the guy by name. Seeing the shop, the girl called Richard so that he could see what beautiful hats were there. Amazed by the beauty, Eliana took one of the hats, which she also liked. After trying it on, the smile on the girl's face became even brighter, and she asked Richard how she looked and whether the hat suited her. The guy smiled and said that it suited her. Having asked him to take a look, the heroine handed him the hat and was sure that it would suit him. When Richard put it on, the girl said that he looked very cool. The guy's face showed confusion, and at that moment Eliana chose a hat for Freddie as well. Richard looked at the heroine with a terrifying look and asked who Freddie was. Realizing that she had never told Richard anything about him, she revealed that Freddie was Adam's student. He is the same age as Eliana, and probably the same height, and at the same time he has beautiful sky-blue hair. A sudden cry about a thief made the heroine turn to the side. The same thief, whose clothes prevented anyone from seeing his appearance, was running straight towards her. Richard immediately ran up to the fallen Eliana and asked if she was hurt, to which she replied that she was perfectly fine. Turning to face the thief who had fallen with her, Eliana was in great shock. In front of her sat that same Freddie, whose condition was quite bad. Looking up, he realized that it was his mistress standing before him. Suddenly, the seller of the shop from which the boy had stolen the bread appeared from the alley. Frightened, Freddie ran away without even looking back. Without having time to stop him, Eliana became increasingly surprised by what had happened, and the salesman standing next to them continued to shout after the guy. Hearing the heroine call his name, he assumed that they knew each other, but the dumbfounded Eliana didn't even know what to tell him. After asking the girl to stop questioning him, Richard politely asked to talk to him about the situation. Sitting at the table, Eliana noticed how suddenly it had become snowy, and Richard suggested that perhaps the snow would stop falling tomorrow morning. When Eliana brought up the situation, she thanked the guy for paying for the bread, to which he replied that everything was fine. Richard decided to ask the heroine about this thief. Eliana was absolutely sure that it was Freddie and that he also recognized her. She couldn't even imagine that he would steal bread and assumed that he was in a difficult situation since it was difficult for him to find food. Having asked not to worry too much, Richard pointed out the fact that since Adam's student was here, it meant that he was definitely here with him, and they could meet the magician soon. Seeing Eliana's worried state, the guy decided to change the subject. He told how he had heard that she had become close to the Griffclaw and, having confirmed this, she asked whether he had found out about it from Ku himself. Eliana explained to the bewildered Richard that she named him that because he made those sounds. Richard grinned and nodded in response to her question about whether he had already given the Griffclaw a name. Richard was very surprised that the girl was not afraid of him, and she explained that the words about her not being afraid of him at all would be a lie. But she was very glad that Ku was very kind to a stranger like her, and perhaps she was afraid of him only because she judged him by his appearance. Understanding her, Richard added the words that just because someone is a monster doesn't mean they attack people. Agreeing with him, Eliana told him about her intention to look for dried fruits the next day, since Ku really liked them. When the guy suggested that he would really like bananas, Eliana began to think about what fruits they needed to buy tomorrow. Looking at the girl's concern and care, Richard couldn't help but smile. With heavy sighs, Freddie ran to the alley, where a man was already waiting for him, who began to get indignant because the guy returned empty-handed. Without having time to catch his breath and without saying anything in response to the indignation, Freddie immediately told his teacher that he had met Eliana. Adam was shocked by the news that his mistress was in Rivi. Looking at the purchased things, the heroine listed what they bought as a gift. Richard thought they had already bought gifts for everyone, and Eliana agreed, noting what a productive day they had had with him. Reminding us of the remaining matters, the guy said that the guide should arrive soon. Hearing a knock on the door, Eliana headed towards it. Opening the door, a man entered the room, introducing himself as Benjamin and Olivia's humble servant. Eliana was very surprised when the man mentioned the honeymoon, which his boss wanted to make unforgettable, but Richard covered her ears and told her not to listen to him. Benjamin relayed Olivia's words that this was a vacation for young people who had been married for less than a month. Richard stopped in displeasure when Eliana, hearing about the couple and the vacation, agreed with his words. The man explained that there are many things to do in Revi Fortress. For example, couples and lovers often go to the snowy shore. Benjamin held out his hand, his eyes shining, and explained how lucky they were because there would be a special event today. He announced that there would be an auction today, for which they had prepared a special item that the lady could not even imagine. Richard thought it all sounded like an illegal auction, and he couldn't bear to talk about it anymore. But the words that, according to rumors, this item was from the fortress of Eliana's family made the guy shocked. Eliana was stunned when she heard that the object was a golden cup. In Eliana's mind, she could clearly see the moment when her brother, holding out that very cup, asked her to treat it with great care. Robert told the heroine that this bowl contained balm and aromatic oil, which he would be anointed with as the heir. Eliana was very surprised when her brother explained that her role was very important, and that it was for her to bring it to him at the coronation ceremony. After asking her not to worry too much, Robert said with all the confidence in his words that Eliana would handle it perfectly. All of Eliana's thoughts were dispelled when she started and heard Richard calling her name. After apologizing for having scared her, he explained that they would be there soon, to which Alina replied that she was just lost in thought. Remembering the expression Richard had on his face at the recreation center, Eliana asked about the auctions taking place in the fortress. Richard explained that in the past, auctions were often held at Rewi Fortress, and while the auctions themselves were legal, the items put up for sale there were often taken illegally. Understanding the whole situation, Eliana asked if this cup was real then. Having reminded the girl that Robert had given this cup to the magician, he suggested that since the magician was somewhere in Revi's fortress, this story seemed quite plausible. The words that they still don't know how the cup ended up at auction made the girl think, and she realized that she would only be able to find out about this when she met Adam in person. Having stopped the carriage, the guide shouted to the guests with a smile that they had arrived. Looking out the window, Eliana waited for the guide to open the gate for them. Suddenly, Richard revealed that while it was not uncommon for a mage to have an apprentice, he did not know about Adam's apprentice, and Eliana told him that it was her father who brought Freddie to the fortress. At the same time, she suggested that this was precisely the reason why Adam didn't like him. When he showed his magic on flowers as a child, the heroine was amazed by it and considered it incredible, while Freddie himself was not sure about it. With a confused look on his face, he explained that even his teacher considered it a basic skill. Eliana silently looked at the boy, whose eyes were cast down and whose skills were clearly underestimated. Turning to him and inviting him to look at it a little closer, she held out a pot of flowers to him. While he was looking at the flowers, the heroine told him that no matter how much she watered them, the plants still withered. But thanks to Freddie's magic, her flower regained its beauty. With a smile on her face, she told him with all confidence that he was a very excellent magician. At these words, Freddie's eyes sparkled and even more embarrassment appeared on his face. Noticing that his face had turned red, Eliana realized that he was embarrassed and just laughed at him. Freddie, who was standing near the fortress, was called out by the teacher's voice, who asked how long he was going to stand there like a pillar. Adam was sure that the lady had come looking for them after the spell he had cast on the cup had been traced. Pointing his finger at Freddie, the enraged teacher yelled at him for not thinking to bring the lady here since he met her. The guy just continued to silently listen as Adam told him what a disappointment he was for simply running away from there. Turning around, Adam told him to forget about it, because they had bigger problems than that. Looking at Revi's fortress, Adam said that they needed to quickly retrieve the cup from the auction, which was about to begin very soon. The lights illuminated the stage and the host appeared, greeting everyone and announcing that he was once again hosting Revi's auction. Richard and Eliana stood in the crowd and looked at the presenter as he continued to talk about how many people had gathered and the likelihood that they had already heard about that very rumor. Eliana looked at all this with bewilderment and waited to see what would happen next. With a joyful cry, the presenter announced the start of the auction. The first item up for auction was a damaged sword believed to have belonged to an ancient nobleman. Hearing someone offer a price, the host asked if there would be anything higher. Eliana watched as the item was eventually sold for its original asking price. Suddenly, Richard called out to her, and she turned her head in his direction. He asked her if she wanted any of these things, such as perhaps a bowl of essential oil. Surprised, she said that she didn't need anything, and that she was completely fine, since she had no idea how much it cost or whether it was even real. With a smile on her face, she repeated that the truth was fine when Richard told her to not hesitate to tell him if she ever needed anything. Eliana understood perfectly well that if the cup was truly real, then Adam might come looking for it. Looking around, she thought that if this happened, Freddie would come with him too. The sudden words for everyone to pay attention made Richard and Eliana look at the stage. The girl was very surprised when they said that many already understood what kind of thing from the north they were about to see. After the host joked that if anyone knew the head of Richard's fortress, they should keep it a secret from him, anger and rage appeared on the guy's face. When the presenter removed the cloth, everyone saw that the object was the egg of a northern monster. The announcement that it would hatch in just a month surprised the public even more. Richard and Eliana, looking at the monster's egg, continued to hear the presenter's words that if the monster hatched when they were nearby, it would follow them for the rest of their lives. Richard's anger made the veins on his hands clearly visible, and he understood perfectly well that everything the presenter had said earlier was nonsense, since it was impossible that the existence of such a monster would have such an effect on people. People started offering crazy amounts of money for this egg at a wild rate. Seeing how people reacted to the product, Eliana looked at Richard. Suddenly, the eggshell cracked and a monster began to appear from inside, but the presenter had no idea what was happening. Richard and Eliana watched in horror as the hatched monster grew larger and larger in size. Having fallen to the floor, the presenter did not know what to do, because before that he had been told that it would hatch in a month. In front of him stood a huge monster with spikes on its back, from behind whose mouth huge fangs and a long, thin tongue were visible. Seeing the huge monster, the crowd of people ran to the exit, and Richard, covering Eliana with his body, did not let her get knocked down. The girl was very surprised and scared when, after all the people had run away, Richard took off. Turning around, he said that he would be back soon, and that she should go to a safe place as soon as possible. Alina shouted loudly after him, but he, without turning around, headed towards the monster. The monster's tail began to beat against the walls, and the monster itself grabbed the fleeing man. All his cries for help were replaced after a couple of minutes by the chomping sounds of a monster. Not far from the monster on the floor lay the presenter himself, who had been thrown there when the monster increased in size. As he started to stand up, his shoulder hit one of the boxes containing the auction items, and all the decorations fell to the floor with a loud clatter. Turning around, he saw the monster already sitting in front of him, saliva falling from its mouth onto the floor. The presenter began to scream from the horror he saw, and tears of fear welled up in his eyes. Begging for mercy, he saw how the huge mouth of the monster with sharp fangs was already right in front of him. Hearing the sound of the sword, the presenter removed his hands covering his face and opened his tear-stained eyes. In front of him, he saw a guy pierce the monster's mouth with his sword. Still frightened, the presenter asked him if the monster was dead. When he shouted at him to kill the monster quickly and pay him handsomely if he did it quickly, the young man only looked at him angrily and told him that apparently nothing had happened to his mouth. With another swing of his sword, he completely cut the monster's throat. The presenter watched in horror as the monster's blood began to splash everywhere. Saying that his greed and arrogance had put a lot of people in danger, Richard jumped away from the monster. After taking a closer look at the long black hair and dark blue eyes, the presenter realized that the guy who killed the monster was Richard. The severed head of the monster fell on the leader, who shouted his name at the last moment. Touching the slain monster, Richard thought about how incredibly painful it must have been to be unable to control his growing body. Richard knew perfectly well that a monster could not grow so suddenly, so there was definitely an external factor of a magician or someone close to him. In a menacing voice, the guy told this someone to stop hiding and come out, but he heard nothing in response. The heroine looked with bewilderment as Richard spoke about what was waiting for him to decide how to punish him, because he was a magician of Eliana's family. With anger on his face, Richard demanded an explanation of what had happened on the way to the fortress. Adjusting his glasses, Adam stood there in bewilderment, not knowing what to answer him at all. Even after they left the building, the magician was very glad that his mistress was safe, and she also noted how good it was that he and Freddie were not harmed. Adam was very surprised by Eliana's question about what brought them to the city. He began to tell how that night Robert had ordered them to flee immediately. Due to the sudden attack of the knights, he and Freddie quickly escaped from the fortress. He was very sorry that he could not fulfill his duty as a fortress mage, but Eliana told him that everything was fine. After the girl said she was sure it was hard for them in the unknown area, Adam told her that the city was full of lawlessness and that his bowl of essential oil had almost been stolen. Taking out the cup, he said that he was still able to find it because he cast a tracking spell on it and was also able to meet the lady here. Looking at Richard's displeased expression, Eliana told the mage that the spell he had used in the auction room was too much to solve the problem. She thought that even if it was a monster, doing such a thing to someone who hadn't even been born yet was terrible. Adam adjusted his glasses and said that he would have been stuffed anyway immediately after his birth. Disappointment and surprise overwhelmed Richard after these words. Eliana was no less surprised, and Adam said that he had simply led him to his inevitable death a little earlier. At the same time, he added that the most important thing was that he had found the sacred cup, which was still as valuable as he, the fortress mage. Having said that, since the two of them had come for them, the magician turned around and suggested that they return to their beloved fortress. Eliana watched as he wanted to set off without delay and told her to follow him. Adam was very surprised by her words that they could not go to the fortress now. Already in the cafe, Adam was very disappointed because he didn't think that all the rumors were true. Looking up, he yelled at Freddie for daring to eat in such a situation. Reminding him of how much they had been through, Eliana said that Freddie absolutely needed to eat a lot and suggested that he start eating quickly, for which the magician thanked her. Turning to Freddie himself, the heroine told him to eat more because he needed to gain strength. Eliana was very surprised when he asked her for forgiveness. Freddie said that he ran away after such a surprising meeting only because he was very ashamed of stealing the bread. He noted that if he had been more careful with his luggage, the cup would not have been stolen, and everything that happened was only due to his incompetence. Having said that everything was fine, Eliana put her hand on his shoulder and said that all this only happened because they were in a hopeless situation. With a smile on her face, the girl reminded him that he was still the same great magician for her. From these words, the young man's face turned red, and tears began to appear in his sparkling eyes. Trying to change the subject, Eliana said that dessert would be arriving soon and asked Freddie if he would have it, to which he agreed. Looking at how the heroine managed to resolve the whole situation, Richard smiled. Already in the fortress, Eliana, giving meat to the dogs, told them not to make fun of her because they still had some meat. Seeing how fast the dogs were eating, she guessed that they must have been very hungry. Richard said that when he checked them, they were all in good shape, and he would most likely be able to subdue them without any problem. He answered affirmatively to the heroine's question about whether he was leaving tomorrow. After this, the heroine asked when he would return. He said that he usually leaves for a week or more, as they are constantly moving, looking for traces of monsters, and when they find them, they destroy the entire pack. Upon hearing this, Eliana noted that she found this work very dangerous and difficult. As he was about to leave, Richard told of one example of an overcrowded group of monsters that came to the village. He said that usually hungry monsters are very hostile to every person they see. Richard's family was called upon to protect people from them. Eliana also noted that she sees some people catching monsters from the north in order to buy and sell them illegally, to which Richard agreed with her. Remembering the monster from the auction, she thought it looked like it was in excruciating pain. Richard explained that even though people know the dangers of monsters, they still use them for their own personal purposes, and that is why it becomes difficult for people and monsters to exist together. Then Eliana said that seeing how Ku was protective and happy with small gifts, she realized that they also had feelings, and just because they couldn't understand each other didn't mean that people could use monsters for entertainment. Agreeing with her, Richard said that he was very glad that she had the same opinion, to which Eliana explained that it was all because of her training as his wife. Hearing these words, a smile appeared on Richard's face. Leaning his hand against the griddy, Richard asked her if she would mind if he came to see her. Imitating Richard, Bella asked if Eliana would mind seeing her today. The girl was still surprised that it was actually Richard who said that. She said that she wanted to ask why, but at that moment a knight came who was looking for him. Eliana was very surprised when Bella suggested that before he left, Richard wanted to perform a ceremonial tradition with her. The girl explained to her that the tradition was to give a gift to someone going on an expedition as a symbol of hope that he would return. After saying that friends do it too, but married couples should do it, Eliana asked what kind of gift it should be. Bella told her that these are usually things that can be carried with you, but you can give anything, for example, a button. The sudden scream was very, very loud and interrupted the girls' conversation. Freddie was screaming loudly about the monster and asking Adam to deal with it, which made the girls turn around. In front of them stood Ku, with Adam and Freddie sitting next to them, looking frightened. Not understanding what was happening, Eliana watched as Bella approached them and noted that they had arrived quite noisily. Getting straight to the point, she explained that even though Ku was a monster, he still worked with them. After asking them not to do anything stupid, she said that Richard would not leave them alone if they used strange magic or cast a spell on him. Looking at the girl with a less than pleased expression, Adam said that they had misunderstood him. When he started talking about his accomplishments and how he couldn't possibly make the same mistake twice, Bella simply turned around and said that she didn't care at all and that no one had asked him. Turning around, Bella added that she was the youngest mage working for the head. The fact that she said this in case he went around bragging like he had before made Adam angry. Eliana ran up and greeted Ku with a joyful smile. After stroking him, she explained to the bewildered Bella that she had given him this name recently. Pointing to the departing mage, Bella explained to Ku that the man who had been bragging recently was Adam. Turning around, she told him that Adam's student Freddie was standing there. Approaching him, Ku looked at the young man with interest, and Bella, who was standing behind him, said that since he and Adam would be here for some time, Richard said to introduce them in advance. When Ku poked Freddie's shoulder with his nose, even the young man was thrown back a couple of steps from such force. Shaking his head, the monster realized that Freddie was also quite weak, and this was no good. Opening his eyes, he saw the young man looking at him with admiration, because it was the first time he saw a monster so close. Looking at Ku, Freddie said that his slender body and shiny tail were not at all like the ones he had read about in books. The monster was very happy with such compliments and put his tail on his shoulders, and noticing this, the girls standing behind realized that he was very pleased with Freddie. Suddenly, Alina remembered the gift and began to think about what to give Richard. Already at night, Eliana kept thinking about what Bella told her about how it doesn't matter what the gift is. Knowing that the chief was a very good man, she understood that he would probably be pleased with any gift she gave him. Hearing a knock on the door, Eliana got out of bed. Opening the door, Richard walked into the girl's room with a serious face. With a trembling voice, a nervous Eliana noted that he had arrived. Seeing that Eliana was ready for bed, Richard thought that it seemed he had come quite late. He said that he wanted to meet before she went to bed, but apparently that didn't work out, to which the girl replied that she simply changed her clothes beforehand. Silently, Eliana carefully closed the door to her room. Suddenly, Eliana and Richard turned and addressed each other at the same time. Eliana was very surprised when the guy told her to speak first. Richard was ready to listen carefully to what the girl had to say. With thoughts of what she needed to tell him about the ceremonial tradition, Eliana tried and was only able to utter a couple of sounds. Suddenly, she pointed to a chair and shouted that they absolutely needed another chair. Richard watched in bewilderment as Eliana tried to explain her request. Having agreed, he said that he would bring a chair here, since there were many of them in the fortress, and the confused Eliana thanked him. Eliana tried to reassure herself that since they weren't technically a married couple, the head's visit might not be connected to ceremonial tradition. Looking at Richard, she thought that if that was the case, he might feel burdened by accepting the gift. Turning to the girl, Richard suddenly began to talk about how if she had any request or problem, she should not be afraid to turn to Olivia or the elders. Surprised, Eliana listened to him say that although he knew how independent he was, she probably had a lot of things she wanted. Richard believed that if he didn't say this, the girl might start to accumulate stress, and that's why he wanted to meet. Eliana was very embarrassed and surprised when he, having said that she was part of his family, emphasized this as a fact. With a smile on his face, the guy asked them to trust his family and rely on them. Seeing that the girl had lowered her face, he called out to her. Without letting him show her face, red with embarrassment, the girl agreed and said that she would do just that. At the same time, cries were heard throughout the entire fortress of Eliana's family that someone was invading them and that the lord needed to be properly protected. The thin knife quickly fell to the floor with a loud clang. Picking it up, Joseph told his attacker that he had heard that it was his first visit to the fort in 8 years. The man said with a grin that he couldn't have imagined that he was going to kill him with such a thin knife. Anger began to appear on the boy's face as Joseph began to remember how Adam praised him for being a very smart child. Turning to Tyler, he said how pathetic he looked when he acted on emotions. Coming closer, Joseph began to talk about how he should be aware of what he had done, because it would be considered a huge sin. Tyler's face grew even more angry as the man demanded an excuse. His angry words about Joseph being a disgusting traitor made the man surprised. Tyler believed that becoming the keep's caretaker had blinded him to his own desires, and that it was for this reason that he had killed Robert and his grandfather. Joseph laughed and reminded that the boy's family and he himself had received attention from several geniuses, and therefore could have been misled. Adjusting his glasses, he said that in memory of his parents, he would pretend it never happened. Joseph said the truth was that Robert had committed suicide. After hearing that Eliana was his grandfather's killer, the boy's face reflected a mixture of surprise and disbelief. Not believing him, Tyler exclaimed that he shouldn't make fun of him because he too had been in the land of wisdom and knew that his grandfather had died after being stabbed and his body had never been found, while Eliana couldn't carry a knife. With a smirking face, Joseph tried to convince him that Eliana was not the kind child he once knew. Tyler didn't want to believe his words that Eliana hated her uncle because he took the place of her brother who committed suicide, and since Alfred was under his protection, she also hated him so much that she decided to kill him. He tried to prove that he was the only master for Tyler because Eliana chose another family, and he was left all alone. Extending his hand, Joseph said that if Tyler became the king's prime minister, he should return to the land of wisdom to continue his studies. The guy carefully brought his parted lips to his hand, pretending that he was going to kiss her. Suddenly, Joseph cried out in terrible pain in his arm from the bite. Looking at the man trembling in pain, Tyler said that all the words coming out of his mouth were lies, because Eliana had no reason to do this. With a smile on his face, Tyler confidently said the words for the man to just leave him alone. Joseph was very furious after these words and noted how impudent it was. The man angrily kicked the tied-up boy, causing him to fall to the floor. Telling him not to think he could escape just because he was alive, Joseph ordered the knights to imprison Tyler. Hearing Freddy's scream echoing throughout the fortress, Adam yelled at him for causing a ruckus since early morning, but he himself also screamed at what he saw. They both didn't understand what kind of red pile was lying in the middle of the corridor. Adam asked to remove it as quickly as possible because it looked so disgusting that he cannot pass. Looking at the pile of meat, Freddy became scared, thinking that he had made some mistake. At this time, Ku was sleeping and was very pleased that he had helped Freddy make him stronger. Noticing this, William noted that the guests were in a good mood from early morning. Charles approached him and said that he was ready, and his brother suggested that they also go out briskly. Suddenly, Olivia shouted and asked the guys to wait a bit. Noting that she had run all the way here, Olivia only asked them to stand there for a moment. After a bit of rummaging, she handed them 2 brooches that matched their hair color. When the brothers took them in their hands, she explained that she had seen many knights carry keepsakes with them, so she thought it would be a shame if they didn't have one. The brothers noticed that they were much better quality than last year's and very beautiful, to which the embarrassed girl said that they were just lying around her house. Charles and William were very surprised when Olivia began to worry about them and asked them to follow only the leader and not to play the fool. Knowing how dangerous it was there, the embarrassed girl told them to try not to get hurt and to return home safely. With a bright smile, the brothers thanked them and, asking them not to worry, announced that this time they would definitely return safe and sound. Her surprise turned to a smile and she nodded, indicating that she wouldn't worry about them too much. The boys were very surprised and confused, but they had to agree when she told them not to forget that this year they cannot die because of the monster, because she will kill them herself. A bright light illuminated the garden with many different flowers, where Eliana, sitting at a table, was drinking a cup of tea. Noticing such a pleasant atmosphere around her, Eliana thought about how long it had been since she had experienced such peace. Suddenly, someone's voice called the girl by name. Looking up, she could not understand who was standing in front of her. Having tried to say something, Eliana realized that she couldn't say anything at all. Looking at the man in front of her, she realized that she was experiencing a familiar feeling. Seeing all his composure and beauty, a smile appeared on her face. She realized that the unfamiliar guy sitting in front of her was the boss. A smile appeared on his face and a bright pink blush became visible on his cheeks. Opening her eyes slightly, she said Richard's name. Realizing that it was a dream, she thought that she must have gone crazy because she was dreaming about a chapter. Wrapped in a blanket, she couldn't understand how this could happen, since he would only be gone for a little over a week. Remembering the capture, she abruptly jumped out of bed because she needed to meet him, but she overslept. At that moment, in the courtyard of the fortress, Richard looked back at the brothers who had called him. One of the brothers, pointing to a brooch, asked him to guess what it was, and the other happily said that it was a gift. They said that Olivia gave it to them and wished them a safe return. The brothers were very happy that their little sister gave them a gift this year too, because last year they couldn't say anything about the gifts for fear that someone might get jealous, but now they will brag about them as much as they want. With a bright smile on their face, they asked him if he had received anything from the lady this year, but Richard simply ignored their question. Realizing that Richard had received nothing, Charles and William were very surprised, but the guy explained to them that he had not told her about this ceremony. Richard asked to stop when the guys started shouting indignantly about why he didn't do it, because they belonged to each other. He told them with a serious face to take their positions, as they needed to leave soon. As they were heading to their places, one of the brothers asked another what they should do with the leader, to which he suggested telling the elders everything. Looking up at the sky, Richard thought about how he couldn't get the child, who was just beginning to adapt to this place, to participate in his family's culture. He didn't want to burden Eliana with such minor tasks that are the responsibility of a wife, since their official marriage was, in fact, only formally recorded. Remembering how the girl had not dared to say anything to him yesterday, he was angry. Eliana ran to the place without sparing any effort, trying to make it before Richard left the castle. Seeing Olivia in the crowd, she called out to her loudly and asked what was going on with the capture. Approaching her, the girl told her that they would soon be setting off on their journey. Eliana turned around to see Richard commanding the entire formation. After ordering them to raise their weapons, he explained that they would soon be heading into the center of monster territory, so they couldn't be nervous for a second. Turning to Bella, who was standing next to him, he asked how things were going with the magic, to which she replied that everything was perfect, and as soon as he gave the sign, she would immediately send them there without delay. All the soldiers stood in formation, as one, with serious and stern faces. Noticing this, Eliana realized that the atmosphere was quite tense. She had never captured monsters before, but seeing how nervous they were, she realized that capturing them was very dangerous. Thinking back to the moment at the auction, she thought that monsters much bigger and stronger than that one might be waiting for them, but despite that, they would still have to go. Looking at Richard, she realized that everyone else was sending them on their way as well, wishing them a safe return. Seeing everyone's busy schedule, Eliana realized that the leader's words about there being no time to talk today were true. Eliana was very sorry that she had not been able to say goodbye properly and give him the gift, and now it was probably too late. Bella, explaining to Richard, noticed that he was not listening to her at all and was looking the other way. Seeing Richard jump up abruptly and head off somewhere, she asked where he was going. Looking at him, Eliana felt like the head was walking towards her. Walking through the entire line, Richard walked straight towards her with a stern face. Approaching Eliana, he began to talk about how he was not at all indifferent to her, and that he did not care at all that she looked as if she wanted to talk to him. Eliana was surprised by his words, and the fact that he cared about how sad she looked. With a serious face, he asked if she could tell him what was on her mind. Realizing he had put pressure on her, Richard apologized for it. As he was about to leave, he told her to just pretend nothing had happened, but Eliana asked him to stop. As Eliana removed the ribbon from her hair, she realized that she was not at all opposed to being a real married couple and really wanted to see how he would react to such gifts. While waiting for his return, she really wanted to show the head of her thoughts and, holding out her ribbon in her palms, she said that she would be very angry if he got hurt. Richard looked on in surprise as she asked him to return safely with this gift. With her face bright red with embarrassment, she said that she had wanted to say this earlier, but she had thought about it too much, and it was too late. Taking the ribbon from her hands, Richard carefully tied it in his hair. Placing his fist to his chest, he promised to return in one piece and destroy all the darkness of the north. In exchange, he asked her to be safe and sound and gently took her wrist. Richard tied a ribbon there and said that it would be a gift from him. When Eliana pointed out that he had previously tied up her hair, the guy revealed that it was a gift from Robert. She was very surprised by this gift, and Richard said that he thought that this ribbon would suit her much better. With a smile on his face, he was absolutely sure that Robert would definitely protect her. The embarrassed girl with shining eyes looked at him and, thanking him, smiled back. Eliana watched as the entire formation, including Richard and Bella, disappeared with the help of magic. She was very surprised when Olivia, pulling her towards her, asked if she didn't feel like she was much closer to the leader. The heroine looked down in embarrassment when the girl began asking how she was doing and whether her love had grown stronger. Their conversation about Eliana bringing her gift rather late was interrupted by a strong wind. Worried about the girl, Olivia asked her if she was okay. Having agreed, Eliana decided to look around, and Olivia did not understand why such a strong wind was blowing now. Looking towards the north, the heroine saw what bad weather was in that direction. A week had passed since Richard had led the knights to conquest. An anonymous telegram arrived from her family's fortress to Eliane. The heroine's face filled with horror when she read that Tyler would soon be executed. Rushing along the corridor, Eliana did not understand at all why he was in the fortress, because until that moment she was sure that she was in the land of wisdom undergoing training. She suggested that he might have protested against her uncle regarding Elder Alfred, who was killed. The heroine thought that it was only her fault, since she could not protect Elder Alfred. Continuing to run, she suddenly crashed into someone's shoulder and fell. Sitting on the floor, Eliana looked up and saw Olivia, who asked if she was okay. The girl extended her hand and asked where she was going in such a hurry, since she couldn't even see anything in her path. Seeing that Eliana looked a bit unwell, Olivia asked if something had happened to her. The heroine was very surprised when she suggested that she tell her about her problem, and she would try to help her. Already wanting to tell about everything, thoughts came into Eliana's head that she couldn't tell her, because everyone could find out about Elder Alfred. Having stood up, the heroine said that nothing special had happened and that she just needed to tell Adam and Freddie something. Eliana lied that she was very interested in how they were doing and that she wanted to tell them a lot of things, which is why she was in a hurry. Hiding the letter behind her back, she said with a smile that they were probably already waiting for her and therefore she would go first. Watching her go, Olivia thought about how suspicious this situation was. While the heroine was walking to the right room, many different thoughts flashed through her head. She knew that 3 years ago, when her parents died, according to the survivor, Elder Alfred's family members tried to save their parents, but in the end, they also could not return. And recently, the elder himself died trying to protect her. Knowing that 3 members of her family had already died trying to protect her family, there was no way she could let Tyler die too. She knew that people here would definitely help her if she asked, but this was only her family's problem, and she didn't want to bring more problems to everyone. Thinking about solving this problem on her own, she entered the room, where she was immediately met by Adam, who was surprised by her arrival. Looking through the books, the heroine didn't even know where to begin to tell them about this problem. Turning around, she finally saw Freddie and thanked Adam for bringing him. Freddie asked, puzzled, why she was looking for them. Having spoken about the suddenness of this decision, Eliana told them about the plan to go with them to her family's fortress today. Upon hearing this, Freddie and Adam were shocked by this decision. Having interrupted Adam, the heroine was sure that this seemed strange to them because she wanted to return there when she had just escaped. Handing over the letter, she asked them to read this anonymous telegram that had been sent to her from the fortress. Adam took the letter in his hands and, having read it, was very surprised. With a depressed expression, she suggested that Tyler had been caught trying to fight Joseph, and if everything went as per the telegram, he would be executed tomorrow morning. When asked if the leader knew about this, Eliana said that she did not plan to tell the people of this entire fortress about this, and if anyone found out, they would be at a disadvantage. Having tried to dissuade his mistress, Freddie only heard in response that she did not think it was dangerous, since they knew more about this fortress than anyone else. After she explained that they had to invade the fortress today and rescue Tyler before he was sent to execution, Adam became thoughtful. Turning to Adam and Freddie, the heroine explained that they and other people connected with her family were very important to her, and she had already let go of too many people. Pressing her hands to her chest, Eliana confidently said that she no longer wanted to lose people from her circle. With a bow, Adam expressed his full understanding, and as mages of her family, they would do as she said. Turning to Freddie, he asked him to confirm his words, and the frightened guy agreed with him. Handing over the letter, Adam said that he would take care of the preparations and suggested meeting again in the evening, to which Eliana thanked him. As she was getting ready to leave, the heroine thought that if the leader were here, he would not have allowed this, and if she had gone with them, Eliana would again have had to rely on his strength. Thinking that perhaps it was a good thing that Richard was not around, the girl opened the door and said that they would see each other later. Looking at Adam and Freddie, she realized that now she had the magicians of her family. At this time, in the fortress, one of his soldiers approached Joseph with a request that his master needed to check something. When he asked what had happened, the soldier told him something very important. Hearing his words, a smirk appeared on Richard's face.